Chaim Avadia, go online right now for the most awesome shiur on the Parsha that I'm giving right now. And being that it's being recorded that I'm telling you to do so, so it's actually being said now in front of everybody on YouTube and Facebook that I'm telling you to go watch the shiur of that I'm going to give right now. So now you have no choice. Okay, everyone, my dear friends. It's 11:20, and I haven't given my Parsha shiur. Last night I gave a shiur here, and I, to a certain degree, was thinking I fulfilled my obligation on this week's Parsha in my life. It was a very interesting shiur last night. Those who didn't listen, a lot of the things we did discuss in the past, but it comes together in a very special way. But then I said, you know what, Monday night we have to teach the Parsha. I tried a few things. My brain was a little frozen. It wasn't going for me. And time passed. But I have to say I landed on a landmine. I'm so excited. It's 11:15. It's late. So for you crazy people that are up now and watching live, stay tuned. You don't want to miss this shiur. But it's a complete different style than we usually do. Very different. So I came across looking, at this, that. I looked in different books, find the inspiration, find the thought that I was going to teach. And I came across the sefer that I used to give a class called Mashiach Matters. It really, really is something that I should go back to. It bothers me that I haven't. Okay, so we have to reinstate that class. It was a shiur that I used to give on Thursday afternoon. And I've taken the information from this really good book, which is a compilation of teachings regarding Mashiach and the redemption on the order of the Chumash. On every pasuk, almost every pasuk, he compiles from different places pieces, like he actually quotes. He's not his own words. He's just cut and paste. It's a massive piece of work that he did to be able to find everywhere teachings that relate to Mashiach by Rabbi Dubov. So he was the one who compiled it. So I took it out and I was just running through Parshas Vayeitzei, and I have to say I landed on a landmine. The rabbi, I came across a piece from a Sefer Likutei Basar Likutei. Now, who is the Likutei Basar Likutei? He's a recent rabbi. I don't have on him, meaning he's not from a very long time ago. He was a rabbi initially in Europe, must have probably been a rabbi before the war in Europe. Maybe during the Holocaust he escaped. I'm not exactly sure at which point. I don't know his story. His name is Reb Shmuel Alter. Alter is usually the family associated with the dynasty of Gur, the Gera Hasidim. So he's a rabbi in a town in Poland. And again, I looked online trying to find information in him, and I don't have information. All I got today, because he blew me away, and it's the second time. I once did a class on his teachings in Parshas Vayera. Some of you might have remembered. The style is, there were like 25 questions, and then he finds an idea, and he answers all the questions with this one concept, this one idea. And he does the same thing now, but then it was 25 questions, now it's actually 40 questions. And it's not just good answer, it's just such a mind-blowing, breaking open of the entire Torah portion, a way of seeing the entire Parsha. But what was so powerful about it, not only was it brilliant, but it was also heartwarming. I literally was in tears when I was reading it at certain points. So it spoke to the mind and it spoke to the heart at the same time. It was really unbelievable. And it was so up my alley of Mashiach, redemption, Geula, that just makes me so happy, beyond. So he's a rabbi in Poland. Then somehow he ended up in Cuba. He was a rabbi in Cuba for a while. That's interesting. Then he left Cuba and he was in New York. He was a rabbi in the shul of Sadiger, must have been in Borough Park, I would imagine, in Brooklyn. So when he passed away, what's his story? I don't know, but he's just recent. Must have been a very special man, both brilliant in his mind and a very warm neshama, because every time I'm reading his stuff, I'm really falling in love with what he says. It's different style. It's Chasidus drush, which means it's not simple pshat, and it's not pure Chasidus. It's Hasidic ideas, very similar to the style of, and he brings actually a lot, the Bnei Yissaschar. If we ever study the teachings of Bnei Yissaschar, he does a Talmudic kind of a discussion and a drush, a whole drasha, based on Kabbalistic, mystical, Hasidic ideas. So it's different style than the regular Chabad Hasidus that we usually learn. But his heart and soul is so rooted in this piece, and the same thing happened then when I did the piece on Parshas Vayera, when we spoke all about Sarah then, and the Malachim, the visit, and how they sent the Kaishal Bracha to Sarah. It was all about modesty. It was a very interesting discussion we had then. Those who listened to that shiur enjoyed it a lot, I think. I promise you there's no letdown over here. So I know it's late at night, or if you listen to this tomorrow, it's worth listening to this class. I haven't been excited about a class like this in a long time. I would recommend a paper and a pen just to be able to jot down. There's 40 questions, so it's hard. If you want to really have a grip on this, it's good to be able to write this down. Again, it spans the entire Torah portion, almost the entire Torah portion of Parshas Vayeitzei. And I would recommend sitting with a chumash, an actual chumash, before you when you listen to this class, and following along the questions and seeing how this works. Again, it's going to be 40 questions. In the end, it's going to be it's not one answer. It's an idea that is with a few components that is put together as one powerful theme, a very, very core Mashiach theme, and a very inspiring one. So after having spoken all about the class, let's get to the class. Tonight's shiur I am dedicating to a special fellow, Yoel Peso, upon his birthday. His birthday was yesterday. Shnas bracha and hatzlacha, a good year to you. Much bracha and mazel, and only good and happy things. Anybody else that wants to dedicate this class can let us know, post shiur. It's always appreciated. Okay, shall we begin? So let's get to the story of Parshas Vayeitzei. Right in the beginning of the Parsha, right in the beginning of the Torah portion, it says that Yaakov leaves Be'er Sheva, the land of Israel, and he goes to Haran. So the opening words of the Parsha is Vayeitzei Yaakov. That Yaakov went out. So why is there an emphasis on going out? It should have just, Rashi's bothered by the question, it should have just said, Vayelech Harana, that he went to Haran. Should have just said that Vayelech Harana, he went to Haran. That's where he's going. Who cares where he left? So Rashi says that when a tzaddik leaves town, his absence is felt. The hoida, the glory, the shine. There's a certain shine in a city. There's a certain glory in a place when there's a tzaddik living there, a righteous individual, a saintly person. So in Be'er Sheva, it was very strongly felt that Yaakov left. So that's the meaning of Vayeitzei Yaakov. Everybody in Be'er Sheva felt his absence because the light and the glory of the town went away. That's what Rashi says. And again, he's bringing this, the Midrash says this. And Rashi points to another place where we find something similar, where it also mentions about a righteous individual that they left the place that they were in. But it's also not important to say that they left, just where they went. And that is in Megillas Rus, the story of Rus, where it's describing how Naomi, who is the mother-in-law of Rus and Orpah, Naomi was first living, she was the wife of Avimelech, or Elimelech, and she was living in the land of Israel. Then they moved out of the land for whatever reason, and they went to the lands, into the Moab, they went to live in Moab. And now it says, I think in Pasuk Zayin, where is that verse? In Rus, Perek Aleph, Ruth, first chapter, verse number 7, it says over there that Naomi is now returning. Very sad, tragedy struck. Her husband died. Her 2 sons died. So she was now left alone. She was going home. Her 2 daughter-in-laws decided to go along with her. And then she sends them back. Orpah leaves in the end, and Rus cleaves to her. And then Rus becomes, we know the famous, she marries Boaz, and then she becomes the grandmother of King David. So when Naomi is going back, it says, Vayeitzei min hamakom. She left the place. Again, she's returning now. And Vayeitzei, she went out min hamakom. So Rashi says that the Vayeitzei over there, when it says that Naomi left, is the same idea like over here. Because she was a righteous individual. She was a saintly woman. So when she left, her absence was felt. But Rashi adds, and Rashi says, Ha'amor b'Naomi v'Rus. The word Vayeitzei that is mentioned by Naomi and Ruth, and by Rus as well. Which the question over here is, the word Vayeitzei is not referring to Rus. It's only referring to Naomi. Because it says Vayeitzei, and she left min hamakom from the place, Ushnei kaloisea, and her 2 daughter-in-laws were coming along with her. So the word Vayeitzei, however, is only referring to her. Then the verse says later, her daughter-in-laws came along with her. So why does Rashi say that the Vayeitzei, the going out, is referring to Rus, when Rus is not the person that we're talking about? The Mefarshim asked the question, the Lavush, or asked the Lavush, asked this question already on Rashi, the Mefarshim on Rashi. You can actually see it from the Midrash. In our Parsha, the Midrash does this comparison. And then the Midrash doesn't mention Rus. Quite on the contrary, it's clear from the Midrash that the Midrash learns that Vayeitzei is referring to Naomi herself. And I forgot already where I looked it up, and the Midrash seems very explicit that, the Midrash says there was only one tzaddikus, one righteous person there. There was no one else. The Midrash asks, what does it say Vayeitzei? She went out. There were many donkeys that went out. There were many people riding camels, caravans. Why does it mention she went out? Lots of people left the city. But she was special. She was only one tzaddikus. Mefarshim asked the question, what do you mean she's the only one tzaddikus? Rus is also there, she's also tzaddikus. They said at that point, Rus has not yet converted. So we're not, at that moment, she's not yet referred to. Obviously, she was a righteous young lady, as she was at that point as well, but she's not up to par yet with Naomi. But you see clearly from there that Vayeitzei is only referring to one person. So Rashi seems to be throwing in Rus over here, and it doesn't belong. The second question that he asks is, how can you compare the story with Naomi leaving to Yaakov leaving? When Naomi left, she didn't leave over any righteous people in the town. So you can see she was the one tzaddikus. So when she left, all the glory in the town went away, was gone, because there was no other righteous person that stayed in town. Or at least anybody, as we said, that can compare in any way, shape, and manner. But when Yaakov is leaving Be'er Sheva, he's leaving his parents' home, and his parents are alive. Yitzchak, Isaac, is alive. And Rivka, Rebecca, the great tzaddikas, are alive. This couple, super couple. And I'm sure obviously they had such a glow and such a light and such a radiance in the city of holiness. So what do we mean that when Yaakov left, all the holiness is gone? How can we even make such a suggestion? How can we say that? That's problematic. the Re'em asked this question, Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi. Now the Midrash also asked this question. Actually, the Midrash, Rashi doesn't bring it, but the Midrash asks the question explicitly. What's with Yitzchak and Rivka? And the Midrash answers that you can't compare when there's two tzaddikim compared to one tzaddik. I guess Yitzchak and Rivka, because they're a couple, they're considered as one. Yaakov would have been the second tzaddik. And now that Yaakov left, the absence of one tzaddik, the holiness, the light is very reduced. But Rashi doesn't mention that. And let's see if we can find another answer to this. The third question. What is the even, we're now comparing over here Yaakov and Naomi. Okay. A great man and a great woman. But in terms of the journey, it's so different. Yaakov was leaving the land of Israel. The Vayeitzei of Yaakov was that he was leaving the land of Israel and he was going to Mesopotamia, he was going to Haran, he was going outside of the land of Israel. So it was a downward journey. Naomi was doing the opposite. She spent a couple of years, I think, when she was out in Moab. And now she was turning, that means outside of the land of Israel. That's actually one of the reasons they died. They were punished for leaving the land. And now they were making Aliyah. They were going back to the land of Israel. So it's two different going out. Yes, it's similar in the idea that both of them are leaving, but it seems to be a complete different type of a road trip. And so what is the comparison? What is the common denominator over here between the two? Okay, that's at the beginning of the Torah portion. Now we go further in the Parsha. You have the whole story of Yaakov with the ladder, and then he has a dream, and God promises him, and then he comes, finally he reaches Haran, over there he stands by the well, and the reason he's going is his mother sent him, he's fleeing the wrath of his brother Esau, but he's also going because his mother sent him to find a wife to get married. And as he's standing over there, lo and behold, Rachel is coming. She's coming with the sheep. The shepherds told him that she, because they were asking Yaakov was inquiring, how is Lavan, how's the family, how are they doing? And they said, you can speak to her directly, she's coming. And there she was, Rachel came. And it was love on first sight. Yaakov sees her, and he kisses her. And he cries. That's what it describes. Even, obviously, the question that everybody asks, what's with this kiss? And even in today's standards, with the lack of modesty and the total breakdown of, for a man to meet a girl and they haven't even had their first date and he's kissing her already, that's problematic. And here Yaakov meets her and he kisses her. So the question over here is not so much what's the content of the kiss. Obviously we understand that this was a spiritual bonding, a very deep spiritual bonding of deep soulmates. And Yaakov at this point was waiting to get married. He's actually 76 years old at this point. And the question is, why does the Torah have to tell this to us? Why is the Torah, everything in the Torah is significant. Obviously the Torah doesn't want us to emulate this. That when you meet a girl for the first time, it gets, things will end up in a kiss. So there has to be a deeper reason why the Torah is telling this to us. Now regarding the crying, now the kisses, obviously it was deep love. But the crying, why is he crying? So Rashi says, because he had a prophetic vision. Jacob had at that moment the prophetic vision that the love of his life, which he's meeting her for the first time, is not going to be together with him during the long period of time when he's going to be interned in the ground. When Yaakov is going to be buried, Rachel is not going to be with him. He's going to be buried without her. And that's the reason why Yaakov was crying. Which is a strange thing. Okay, you're just falling in love. You're just getting married. You're looking forward to your marriage. You haven't even gotten engaged yet, but you know this is it. Fine. And you're going to have a life together. And hopefully many years. The truth is, Rachel's life was cut short. She didn't live long. But still, he was going to have a nice period of time with her. And I don't know exactly, make the calculations how many years it was. But 20 years until Rachel died. So at this moment, he's now crying for her funeral. Because we know Rachel was not buried with him because whatever they were on the road. He buried her on the road. Fine. But each thing has its time. Why would he now see Rachel and right now he's crying? It doesn't fit. Especially we're seeing the other emotion of intense love and deep connection to her. Why the crying now? So it needs obviously some more explanation. Question number 6. When the Torah goes on to say after this, that Lavan has 2 daughters. After actually he encounters Rachel and he kisses her and he asks her, he gives the animals her flocks to drink, and he lets her know who he is, obviously. And she goes running to tell her father. There is a prospect shidduch over here. So Lavan comes quickly to greet Jacob. He thinks probably he's coming like a millionaire. He just drove up with his what is it called? I'm a little tired now, so I'm not. I was looking for the fancy car. That's no. It was Tesla, and instead, but he came as a pauper, right? Fine. But then after all of that, the pasuk says, and Lavan has 2 daughters. It wants to describe. It begins to narrate the story, how Yaakov was going to. Lavan took Yaakov in to his house. So for 1 month he lived there for free. After a month he said, I'm not going to let you live. Yaakov said, I should work for you. So he said to him, in exchange for marrying your daughters, I'm going to work for 7 years. He wanted to marry, not daughters, marry Rachel. For my wife, I'm going to work for you for 7 years. But again, as an introduction to that, the pasuk says, Lavan has 2 daughters. The older one, her name was Leah, and the younger one, her name was Rachel. So when the Torah is referring to the older daughter, he calls her Hagedola, the big one. And the younger daughter is called the small one. Now, if we take a look usually in the Torah, when the Torah wants to talk about 2 people, one older in age and one younger, we find many places, not always, because you see by Yaakov and Esav, the Torah refers to Esav b'no HaGadol and Yaakov b'no HaKatan. But there has to be a reason for that. Because you find many other places, and you'll see it over here in this Parsha as well, that the Torah uses for the older one, it's called Bechura, and the younger one is called Seira, like we find by the daughters of Lot when it describes. So it says the first night he was with his older daughter. It calls her Bechura, the older one, and then the next. Not the next, and then it was. Both wasn't. It was. I think it was. No. It was the second night. It was with the Tzeira, with the younger one. So it's referring to Tzeira. Where else do we find that? When Yosef puts when all the brothers come to Egypt, not knowing, and they're talking to the viceroy of Egypt, not knowing that this is their brother, he makes a meal for them, and he seats them according to their age. So there it says also, Habachar kibchurasai, v'hatzair kitziurasai, and he put them out in age, young and old. Actually, further in our Torah portion itself, it says when Yaakov has complaints, how come Lavan tricked him? So Lavan says, it's not our style to give in marriage the younger one before the older one. And he uses the word, lasis hatzira, to give the younger, lifnei habchura, before the older. So you see, over here the Torah is referring to them as hagdola, haktana. And you can't answer, he would probably, he presents a possible explanation that we can possibly say the reason she's called Katana is because Rachel was a minor at that time. Leah was already an adult, and Rachel was a minor. So that's why it's calling it Katana, because Katana means a minor. He says you can't say so, because we know that Yaakov set out on this journey 14 years earlier, because he took a little detour when he left. So you know the story. Yaakov stopped in yeshiva, and he spent 14 years. Now, before he left already, his mother said, go to my brother's house and marry from the daughters of Lavan, mentioning 2 daughters, plural, implying that she knew already that Lavan has 2 daughters. That means she was born already, so she had to be at least 14 years old. We also know that it says that when Rachel passed away, she was 36 years old. So that's about 22 years later. Yeah. So you see, she was already an adult. So you can't, once she's over 12, she's considered not a minor. So why do we refer to them as Bechora and Ketana? That's the question. Okay, the next question over here. In verse 21, let's continue. It says, Yaakov finished doing his labor for 7 years. 7 years he's working so that he will be given his wife. So Yaakov says to Lavan, give me my wife. Have es ishti. I'm done the work. Give me my wife. Kimolo yomai, because I've completed my contract. I've completed the time, the allotted time that I was supposed to work. Va'avaya aleha, and I will have relations with her. Intimate relations with her. That's actually what it means. I will come on to her. So Rashi is stunned by this. And how can Yaakov talk this way? A little tznius, a little modesty. Imagine, at your in-laws. Give me my girls or whatever. Something doesn't make sense. So Rashi says, I am paid dalet shana. Yaakov at this point was already, I made a mistake before. Before I said he was 76. Now it's 7 years later. So I think he was 77 at that time. 7 years later, he says, now I'm 84 years old. Okay? And he says, I'm running out of time. I'm 84 years old, and I have a big family to build. He knew his task now was to build the Jewish people. So and he knew destined to have 12 children. So he's got to get working. So therefore he said, and that's why he says, Rashi says, I will come on to her because, and Rashi says, even the light-headed of light, even someone who's really a peasant wouldn't talk like this. So you see, because Yaakov was so, it wasn't about the intimacy, it wasn't about his physical enjoyment in this. It was purely because he wanted to have children. And Lahoila told us Amakach did it for children. This is what Rashi says. So again, this is not really a question, it's just a little diuk. Rashi begins with the words, when Rashi, again, the commentator and Rashi says, when will I establish, when will I have when will I bring to the world the 12 tribes? Yud Beis Shvatim, 12 tribes. Then he changes and he says, Eliyahu letoldos, to give birth to offspring. Just a little nuance in Rashi. Why doesn't he stick to the same term that he said earlier? He used the word shvatim. He should say Eliyahu letshvatim amar kach. He wants to give birth to tribes. Why is he switching and he's saying toldos, offspring? Okay. Now we go further, and again, some of these questions are like serious questions. Some of them are just little nuances, but again, when you see the whole thing together, it's everything fits together like a. Vayiba boiker, it says in the morning. It was in the morning. This is in Pasuk Chaf Hey, Parak Chaf Tes, chapter 29, verse 25. It was in the morning. V'nei Leah. Turns out, again, he gets married. It says that Lavan made all kinds of things. He turned down the lights. He made it dark so that Yaakov couldn't see. He made sure that she was really well veiled. He did it. He was a master con artist. So he was able to scam Yaakov. So much so that Yaakov did not know till the morning. And we also know that Rachel, who has been waiting for her husband for 7 years, saw when she realized what was going on, the horror of what was going on. She was afraid that Leah would be embarrassed. Because we know the story that Yaakov knew who he's dealing with. Knew right away. He right away summed up that Lavan is a cheat, that Lavan is a scammer. So he knew the possibility that he might try to, play games with him. So what did he do? He made certain signs with Rachel. That he knew if there's no light, if it's dark, if you're not going to know, how's he going to know this is really her? So they made certain questions that he was going to ask her, she was going to answer, and that's how he would know it was her. When Rachel realized that Leah is going to go in her place, and she's going to be busted, because Yaakov is going to ask the questions, and she won't know the answers, and it's going to be a horrible embarrassment for her on the night of her wedding. So because of her deep concern for her sister, who is now robbing her, it's an amazing story, robbing her for the love of her life, who she's been waiting for from her soulmate, she gave over the secret code to her, so she can pretend that she were. According to some opinions, Rachel even went, because she was afraid she would detect her voice, she hid in the bedroom, and she spoke, answered, and Yaakov actually heard her, and he thought, I guess Hashem obviously had to help in this whole situation. But this is what happened. The question over here is just a fundamental question. God obviously wanted Yaakov to marry not just Rachel, but also to marry Leah. Okay? The Jewish people were destined to come out from more than one wife, more than one mother. 2 mothers, actually 4 mothers. 12 tribes come from four wives. 2 sisters and 2 maidservants, which were also half-sisters. That was God's plan. Now, is there no other way that Hashem can bring that about but through deception? To deceive Yaakov. Now it's a deception. First of all, it's not nice to deceive someone. Number 1. Number 2, particularly, regarding intimacy, as we're soon going to further develop the question. It's not good that when a person is being intimate with someone else, with their wife, and they don't know, and they're mistaking this woman for someone else. In general, we know the purity of one's thought and the connection has to be very, very deep during intimacy. So for instance, if a person has more than one wife, I'm talking about not just that he's thinking of another woman. It's just like a thought in his head. Her head or his head thinking about someone else. And that's very not healthy and very bad for the children, as we're soon going to see. But in addition to that, if a person is with one, again, in the times that they had, like in Yaakov's case, where people had more than one wife, again, polygamy is inherently kosher in Torah, but again, the Ashkenazi custom for the last over 1,000 years is that it's forbidden. But again, back then it was okay. So if someone is being with one of his wives and he's mistaken, he thinks it's with one and it's really with another one, very not kosher. And in this case, we know that a tzaddik, God protects a tzaddik. Here, God is the one orchestrating that Yaakov should make that mistake. And especially when Yaakov, who is the epitome of holiness, when it comes to his intimacy, we know, again, Yaakov is 84 years old at this time. The sages say regarding Yaakov Avinu that he never ever had any loss of any semen, any procreative substance his entire life. This pregnancy, Leah became pregnant and Reuven was born, and it was actually from their first intimacy. Reuven actually, when Yaakov blesses Reuven, at the end of his life, he blesses his children, he says about Reuven, "You're the first of my strength." That means I've never had an omission. Again, he's 84 years old, his entire life, not once. Again, this explains actually a little bit the kiss. You're not dealing with the person who's got, issues, who's got an uncontrollable inclination doing stuff. He's the holy of holy. He's the closest human being that ever gotten to the perfection of Adam. Okay, he's the tikkun on Adam Arishan. So you're dealing with the epitome of holiness. So for a person who's been so careful all of his life, you would expect that his marriage night, in which he's going to fulfill his mitzvah of having children, of being intimate, even intimacy itself is a mitzvah, and he's going to do that, and he wants to do it in the epitome of holiness. So God should bring about that he should have an intimacy that is not kosher, in the sense that he thinks it's Rachel and it turns out to be Leah. We need some understanding of why God would do that. There has to be a really good reason. For someone, imagine that. Someone, he watched himself for 84 years. And now Hashem goes, and again, he wants, against his will, God brings about something that is considered a blemish. A really good question. So basically what you see from here is that for whatever divine mystical plan that we're going to see soon, Yaakov's union with Leah, his marriage with Leah, had to be in a way that was not a conscious choice of Yaakov. It had to come without him choosing. It had to be some kind of a deception. So we need to understand why. Now, in the morning it says, again, in the same verse it says, Vahi baboker, it was in the morning, Vihine he Leah, and behold, in the morning, there's daylight, he takes a look and he realizes this is not the girl I married. Some other girl over here. Another woman. It's Leah. The Pasuk says, so that's a little interesting because it says as if it would be spelled hu Leah, which hu is masculine. In Hebrew, he, which is hey yud aleph, means she. Hu means he. Here it says hu, which would be read he. It's only that the vowel, the pronunciation is actually he, feminine. We pronounce it as if it would be with a yud. And the question is why? If we're trying to say that she was Leah, it should have said he with a yud. A question really it isn't, because you do have this many times in the Torah. That the Torah, even though it puts a vav, which should be read who, you still read it he. There's many places like that in the Torah. But since we do have many other times where the Torah is referring to she and it puts a yud, so when the Torah does not do that and uses a vav, which is masculine, there must be for each time a reason. So we need to know what is the reason why over here it says V'nehi Leah. That's question number 10. So you're with me? We got another 30 questions to go. Let's continue. Question number 11 in Pasuk Chav Zayin. Okay. So now Yaakov has complaints to Lavan. Why I spent 7 years for Rachel. Now you gave me Leah. So Lavan says, no problem. I'm going to marry you're a terrific guy. You can have Rachel too. But you know what? You're going to work another 7 years. I'll give you Rachel for a wife, and you owe me 7 years of labor for her. Your first work that you did was for my older daughter, Leah. Because as we said earlier, it's not the style to give the younger before the older. That's the way we do it over here. This is the way things work over here. I know you come from a different place, but over here, we work things differently. Okay, Yaakov agreed. And he promised and he pledged another 7 years. Now, what happened was he married her instantly. He didn't wait till after 7 years. He married her immediately. So comes out an interesting thing. In Yaakov's intentions, where Yaakov is approaching this, he's working for Rachel, for Rachel. That's what he's putting in the work in. He gets Leah. So Leah came to him without work. From Yaakov's perspective, Leah came to him without work because he didn't work for her. He was working for Rachel. Rachel, on the other hand, came to him for work. He got Rachel, but he had to work 7 years. Again, let's even say it was the first 7 years, but he worked for her. But from Lavan's perspective, okay, the way we can say it really was, not what Yaakov was thinking, the way it really was. So what happened? Unbeknown to Yaakov, when he worked the first 7 years, Lavan is considering that payment for Leah. That means that in reality, Yaakov first puts in 7 years of work, and the reward, the prize, which is his wife, he gets after his labor. She comes as a reward after his labor. Versus Rachel, it's the opposite. He gets the prize first, because Lavan hands him the daughter immediately, and he has to pay it off. He has to work it off for 7 years. That means that the work is done, the prize comes first, the payment is first, and the labor for it, the payment is for, and the labor that's for the payment, the work that was done, comes after. So we need to understand the dynamics. Why is it? Obviously that it has to do, because everything also has a deeper meaning. So from a God's perspective, why is it that for Leah, there is work first, and only then you get Leah, and for Rachel, she comes just like that. The reward is first, and then the work goes later. The labor paying for it happens later. So that's just needs to be understood. Now let's turn it over from Yaakov's perspective. From Yaakov's perspective, as we said earlier, Leah came to him without any work because he didn't consider his seven years of work for Leah, his first work. Yaakov basically worked 2 times for Rachel. because his 7 years, his initial intention was for Rachel. It's only in the end it turned out that he couldn't get her because he deceived him. So then he tells him, I'll give you the second one only if you work again. So when he's working again for Rachel. So he really worked 14 years for Rachel. Leah he got kind of as bonus. Now, it is explained halachically. When you marry a woman, we know that there's various different ways in which the kedushin, the marriage, takes effect. What is the halacha? What creates the marriage? So there is 3 ways you can marry a woman. B'kesef, b'shtar, u'b'biyah. Which means through an exchange of money, and that's what we do. We give a valuable item. The custom is a ring, and that's how the marriage takes effect. The other way is you can write a document, and he hands her a document saying, you are hereby betrothed to me, and that create. Again, no one does that, but possibly you could technically do that. And the third way is by them having intimacy. Through an act of intimacy, you can actually acquire a woman. The halacha is it's forbidden to do that. And the Gemara says that if anybody does that, they can be liable for lashes. It's very immodest. In other words, you want to first establish this person as husband and wife. She's first your wife, and then afterwards, there can be intimacy. But to use intimacy as a means of acquisition is even though it's one of the 3 ways to acquire a woman, yet it is not recommended. Now, when Yaakov worked the 7 years for Rachel, that labor was considered work. That's considered the money that he gave in exchange for getting Rachel. So for Rachel, he actually did kedushin because he gave his labor and his work. That was like the act of giving her money. Even though it worked for her father, good question. In what sense can her father be the one receiving the money on her behalf? Especially if we say she's an adult. If she was a minor, her father could receive on behalf of his daughter. But now that we say that she's an adult, okay, it's a good question. But for Rachel, we can say there was kedushin through kesef, through money. But when it comes to Leah, the work that he did wasn't for her. So really, what was the kedushin that established her as husband and wife was their intimacy. If that's the case, why did God make it? And as we said before, it's not such a kosher way of establishing husband and wife. So if that's the case, why did God, however, make it happen? And I'm not asking so much because of Yaakov. That was the question we asked earlier, that he had the mistake, he didn't know who it was. I'm asking, why did God make Leah becomes the husband of the wife, of Yaakov, through the method of intimacy? That's what we need to understand. Again, it's not a big question. It's just, it needs understanding that was the fact, and everything has meaning, so why did that happen? So that was question number 12. Question number 13. What's the question? Pasuk Lamed. Okay. After he marries Rachel, after he married Leah, now he marries Rachel. Now he has the two sisters. Vayav, and the verse says like this: Vayav gamel Rachel. He has relations also with Rachel. Vayev games Rachel. He also likes Rachel. Isn't that a strange statement? He also likes her. Didn't we learn in the beginning that he loved her? She was the love of his life, and she was everything. All the hard work was just for her, and Leah was a deception. So what is the Torah suddenly telling me over here? He also loved Rachel, implying that he loves Leah more, but he also loves Rachel. And the next word itself seems to contradict it, because the next word says, Vayev games Rachel, he also loved Rachel, mi Leah, from Leah. Now when you're saying Rachel mi Leah means that he loves Rachel more than Leah. So the gam and the mi, two words, basically it's a very contradictory statement, it's a clumsy sentence over here. He also loved Rachel more than Leah. Then why are you saying he also loved her? He loved her more than Leah. He also loved her. No, he loved her too. more than why are you saying he loved her too? He loved her as well. His primary love was her. That's the question. The words are strange. Another thing is, we know already this. Why is the Torah suddenly saying this to us now when we know earlier how in love he was with Rachel? From the first encounter, as we said, love at first sight. So why suddenly now does the Torah say that he loved her more than Leah? Okay. So that was actually question number 14. 13 and 14. 13 was the contradictory elements over here. And 14 was, what does the Torah want to tell you with this love suddenly over here when we know about this love from earlier? We continue verse Pasuk Lamed Beis, question number 15. Okay, Leah becomes pregnant. And as mentioned earlier, she became pregnant the first night already. I guess she recognized that she was pregnant. She calls him Reuven. She says, because Hashem saw my pain, now my husband will love me. Okay. Here's the question. The Magen Avram, Halachic, this goes back to the question we asked earlier, but here it takes on regarding Reuven, not regarding Yaakov. It's the same question we asked before, but again, regarding the son. In Shulchan Aruch, there are laws pertaining to intimacy. In Perek, in Siman Reish Mem. So it's saying what's kosher, what's not kosher. The whole Siman Shulchan Aruch. Then it says that there are certain children that are rebellious. And they're called the rebellious ones in God, and that's because there was some kind of a blemish. They were brought into the world with a certain blemished intimacy. Their parents were lacking refinement during their intercourse that brought this neshama into the world. So it says, for example, if it was rape, if the woman didn't consent, that's the first one. Or if there was hatred amongst them, as there wasn't love amongst the couple. B'nai Nidui, if for whatever reason the court or whatever put one of them into ostracized, so then the couple is not allowed to have intimacy during that period until they seek annulment of this cherem, of this nidui, of this ostracization. And the next one is B'nai Tumur, as mentioned earlier, when you're thinking you're having relations with one person and it's really another person that messes up the children. So the Magen Avram asks the question, and the Magen Avram says, he brings in Sifkat and Tes, Magen Avram is one of the commentaries of the Shulchan Aruch. He asks, and he says, even both of them are his wives, he's just thinking he's being with one and now he's changing the other. You know, he thought that this was one and this was the other one. It's fine. Tzarachi asked the question. Yaakov niskavan l'Rachel uba Leah. If this is a bad omen for the children, the first one of the Jewish tribes, Reuven, is like the first Jewish tribe. Again, in our ancestry, we have three parents, three generations of parents, and then there's children. There's Am Yisrael, the Jewish people. The first one of the Jewish people, who are the Jewish people, no more from the parents, is Reuven. So we know we all have challenged, it's not easy with children. But you would expect we get it right at least for the first one. So the question is, was Reuven born messed up? That's what it says in Shulchan Aruch, that you have a child like this, they will be rebellious, they won't be okay, there's something wrong with them. So Yaakov niskav l'Rachel uba Leah. Okay, so you know what the Magen Avram says? Ubesefer Yud Mamaris. Actually, in the Sefer Yud Mamaris from the Mabit, one of the early philosophers, Kosov, he writes, Reuven, because of that, Reuven's neshama, a certain degree, some kind of blemish with Reuven. Shemshum zaloi not loi shevet Reuven chelik le'eretz Yisrael. There's some kind of a defect in Reuven. That's why the tribe of Reuven did not get land in the land of Israel. It to be in the land of Israel, you had to come from a very kosher birth. Reuven is a little off. So therefore, the entire tribe of Reuven did not end up having a lot in Eretz Yisrael. Because we know that it came by the initiation of Reuven itself, because they had, the Torah relates in the end of Numbers, that they had a lot of cattle, and they wanted grazing lands, and they said the lands outside of, actually these are lands in the Golan Heights. This was not part of, these lands were very fertile lands, and this will be very good for our flock. And Moses gives it to them. Reuven and Gad. So Reuven didn't, but in the end, they didn't end up being part of the land of Israel. If that's the case, and why? So he brings from the Mabit, from in Asar Mamaris. No, Asar Mamaris not from the Mabit. It's from the Ramah Mepano. That's again, which he says that why did Reuven forfeit? Because he was born from such a union. The Magen Avraham doesn't like that. He says, okay, so there's a little bit of a blemish, but it says that these people are rebellious. It doesn't seem right. So the Magen Avraham wants to answer that this idea that the children can be messed up when it ends up being the wrong person, the wrong one of his wives, is only if when he got attracted and was initiated towards the physical intimacy, he saw he was taken by one of them, by this particular woman, by this one of his wives. That's what he had a desire for her. And then in the middle it switches. So then, since his intentions and his thoughts were on one, and it ends up someone else, that's what can mess up. They're not being intimate, meaning they're not really connecting. The two are not really connecting because he's thinking of someone else. There's a third person there in the intimacy, which is not an intimacy. But in our case, the Magen Avraham says, at the time of the chuppah, it was already Leah. And Yaakov Avinu was interested and desired this woman. He just did not know that this woman is not Rachel. It's not Leah. It's not a problem. It's only if there has been some kind of an excitement towards the other, and then it gets switched. That's when this spiritual mess happens. But it does not. That's the answer of the Magen Avraham. Fine. But his question over here is that, this whole thing was so orchestrated by God. This was nothing to do with. It's not like someone goes and he's looking where he shouldn't be looking, thinking the wrong thoughts, and then he's thinking about that when he's. Okay, you can say it's the father's fault, and then you can always ask the question, what's the kid's fault? Okay, it doesn't have to be the fault. That's what responsibility of parents are. Just like when parents are irresponsible and they don't watch their child when the child is young and the child falls down, hurts themselves, and maims themselves and injures themselves in an irreparable way, whether the kid's fault or not the kid's fault, the kid is that way because the parents didn't act responsibly. So the same is also some kind of a spiritual type of a defect. But in this case, it was totally not Yaakov's fault. It's no one's fault. God is messing this up. So why is he bringing it? The first of the tribes, Reuven, should be a messed up kid. And to the point that he forfeits. If we're going to say, we're going to accept that, he forfeited Eretz Yisrael, this portion of Eretz Yisrael because of that. That seems very unfair. And it's not just a blemish on Reuven, it's a blemish on Yaakov as well. It's an eternal blemish. Because forever, when Yaakov is looking at his children settled in the land of Israel, he sees Reuven and, God will see about soon, but he sees Reuven outcast, outside of the land. And whose fault is it? He has him to blame. So forever, Yaakov has to suffer the consequences of this exchange by watching the harm that he did to his children when it was not his fault and he didn't even want to do it. Doesn't seem right. Something is wrong. Okay, question number 16. We fast forward, she has 3 children, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and now she gives birth to her 4th son. Leah keeps on having children. Okay, Pasuk Lamed Hey, Vatar Oid Vatelet Bain, she gives birth to a son, Vatomer, and she says, Hapam Oides Hashem. Now I will thank God. Al Ken Kara Shema Yehudah, she calls him Yehudah, Vatamid Miledes. She ceased to give birth. She calls out, now I will thank God. The question over here is, and the Barbanel asked this question, why did she wait to thank God only after Yehudah was born? You have a child, thank God. Especially since the whole marriage really wasn't intended for you. You weren't supposed to be the wife. That God had mercy on you, and he brought you in. So thank God you had Reuven. And not only you had Reuven, you had Shimon, you had Levi. So you should give a lot of thank yous. A woman actually, after she gives birth, is supposed to bring a korban. Some zachatas, but there's a thank you for Hashem. And over here, she gives. Now I'm going to thank. What happened with the thanks before? If anything, she could say. So Rashi says, why now? What's the emphasis? Hapam, right now. So Rashi says, because the mothers, they were all nevios, they were all prophets. And they knew that Yaakov was going to have 12 children from 4 wives. So if there's equal, then it's each one 12. So we're going to divide them like we spoke last night. Each mother of the 4 is going to have 3. So the fact that she had 3 children, that was to be expected. Now that she got more than what was allotted, she got a 4th, she took more than, and this was very meaningful to her. She's going to be mothering another tribe of the Jewish people. This was significant. So therefore, she said, now I will thank her. That's what Rashi says. However, he says, doesn't really explain it. That means that in this case, you need to give a bigger thank you, but not that you shouldn't thank for the first 3. The emphasis over here that now I will thank implies that only now thank and not before. That needs explanation. The next thing that needs to be understood is it says, she called him Yehudah, Vatamoid Miledes. She stopped giving birth. Finished. Because right after this, she doesn't have children anymore. She's getting worried. That's why she brings in her maidservant to she can have children through her maid, which are also going to be kind of her stepchildren. Why is it that when Yehudah was born, stop? She was doing so well, and now suddenly there is a halting in the birth. We need an explanation why that happened. Question number 18. Also on the same subject. Why is Yehudah the 4th son? When Yehudah is the ultimate dynasty. From Yehudah comes kingdom. From Yehudah comes King David. From David HaMelech. From Yehudah comes Shlomo HaMelech. From Yehudah comes Mashiach. This is like the crown jewel of the Jewish people. So why is he left for number 4? Should have been done earlier. The first one, you can say he wasn't born first, because the first one is Bechor. And Bechor is supposed to work in the temple. And Yehudah, it's 2 different things. There is priestlyhood, and there is kingship. So it had to be divided. Reuven was supposed to be the priest. Reuven forfeited because of something that he did. Fine. But Reuven would have been the Kohen. And, Yehudah. So, but then, he could have been second. Why does he have to wait for number 4? Pretty pushed down the line. Why? Such an important child should have been born earlier. Question number 19. We're starting the next parak. What does it say? Vatera Rachel kilo yolda leYaakov. Rachel sees she didn't give birth to Yaakov. She's envious. Vatikane Rachel bachos. And now she's envious. Isn't that strange? She's envious now. Till now, she's perfectly fine. Here you have, she would have been the only wife. Yaakov wasn't interested in anybody but her. She would have been married to him, and she would have been the only one. There would be no questions of anybody else with other children. It would have been just exclusive her. The mother of the Jewish people, the destiny would have been just her. She goes, and her sister kind of steals her way in. Okay, it wasn't her idea, it was her father's idea, but still, She's so noble, she's so kind. Rachel has a heart of gold. She'll go and give her sister over her signs so that her sister won't be embarrassed, even though she's literally, and she didn't even know that she would be the second wife. It could have been that's it. Yaakov would have been satisfied, and that's over, and it would have been done, and they would never. And yet she graciously goes and does it. Now suddenly she's experiencing envy. What happened to her pure heart? Why is there suddenly a change of heart by Rachel that she's experiencing envy, which just doesn't seem to be a good feeling? Okay, Rashi says that she was envious from the good deeds. She wasn't envied that she had the children. She didn't have that. It wasn't her physical good lot that bothered her. It was, she said, had she not been a righteous person, more righteous than me, then why she had, then I would have also had children. The fact that she has children or not must be that she's a greater, and she envied her in her ways. Okay, so that makes it a little nicer. But perhaps there's another answer here. The other question is, why did the envy start right now? Why is it that at this point she's suddenly becoming envious from her? Why doesn't she have that? I mean, it seems like what she was envious was that Leah has children and she doesn't. So it could have been after Reuven. Okay, at least after Shimon, she's got two already. I still don't have any. They got married at the same time, 1 week apart. And she's already having the second pregnancy. You're watching that. It's 9 months later. Now she's having her second pregnancy. I haven't had one. And then it's the third pregnancy. It seems only after Yehudah is when she became jealous. You might answer and you say, based on what we said before, that now Leah was already cutting into her lot. Because till now she had 3. Okay, she knew 3, 3, 3, and 3. They'll divide the children. But now that Leah is having 4, now she's envious. Can't answer that. Because who says it's going to be 3, 3, 3, and 3? Maybe there's going to be 4 wives. Okay, let's say they know that. So, again, the prophecy was not how many there was going to be from each. That was their own assumption. Because you couldn't have a prophecy it was going to be 3, 3, and 3, because that's not what happened. So obviously it wasn't the prophecy. 4 wives we see from Rashi earlier that they knew 2 things. It's going to be 12. They knew the total number. That was a prophecy. The total number will be 12, and it will be from 4 wives. But how it will be divided can be many ways. So the fact that she had 4, maybe Rachel is also going to have 4, and the other 2 wives will have 2 each. So you don't know that. So that would not be the reason. There must be something else over here that her jealousy or her envy started now. Okay, question 21. Ooh. So now Rachel is getting very upset. And she's telling Yaakov, I don't get it. She tells Yaakov, give me children. If not, I'm going to die. And Yaakov says, who am I? Am I God? I'm the one who gives children? Anyway, so Rachel says, why don't you pray for me? She said, didn't your grandmother... no, because Yaakov said, why don't you pray? So she answered, so Yaakov said, well, what do I mean pray? I have children. It's you that don't have children. I have children. So I'm not praying. So Rachel said, I don't get it. She said, your grandfather, Abraham, also had a son, Yishmael, and yet he prayed for Sarah. So you should pray for me. It's good that you have children, but I don't. So Yaakov said, well, how can you compare yourself? It's a tough answer. He said, how can you compare to my holy grandmother? You compare yourself to my grandmother, Sarah. She was a very big tzaddikas. Why was she such a big tzaddikas? She was willing to bring in a competition. She took in Hagar to be a wife to Aaron. You didn't do that. So now Rachel says, oh, if that's the problem, I'm also going to do that. If that's what's necessary to take in a competitor, a maidservant, I'm willing to do that too. And she takes her maidservant, Bilhah, and she gives it to Yaakov, hoping that would, she would do the same thing that Sarah did and which Sarah did, warranted to have children. That's what happens. But the question over here is, hold it, who are you talking to? What is Yaakov even saying? You're talking about a woman, talking about bringing in a competitor? It wasn't just bringing in a maidservant over here, that you'll to have to be a semi-wife, to be a what you call a pelegesh, a concubine over here. We're talking about she took her and allowed her sister to almost bump her completely and take her place. You're talking about selflessness? Why does Rachel need any other merit more than that merit that she was willing to do and give up her role as not just as the wife? We're not just talking about over here, romance. We're talking about the ultimate destiny of the mother of the Jewish people, and she was willing to give it all up because to treat her sister nicely. What a surrender! What a mesiras nefesh! What an incredible person this is! What a sacrifice! And you're telling me that Sarah did this? Her sacrifice is way bigger than Sarah's sacrifice. And in order to, and not only does Yaakov make that argument, but Rachel, in her defense, doesn't say, "Are you kidding me?" She doesn't say that. She says, "Okay, I'll bring Bilhah in," implying that she herself agrees that it's not sufficient what she did. So that needs explanation. Why? Good question. Power question. Question number 22. Okay, Bilhah goes instead. So 1 second. So what does she do? She takes her maidservant. She gives. Bilhah becomes pregnant. Bilhah is the Rachel's maidservant. She gives birth to Yaakov for her son. And what does Rachel say? Donani Elokim. God judged me. And he listened to my voice and he gave me a son. That's what she called him, Don. God judged me. Judge, what sin did she do? What? Judging is when you do something wrong, you're being judged on it. But Rachel didn't do any sin. Why are we talking about judgment over here? Mefarshim asked this question. Okay, the Yitzchak, the Alshich asked the question. In the next pasuk, pasuk Ches. No, this is not the next verse. This is pasuk Ches. Is 2 verses further. Bilhah becomes pregnant again, very quickly, and she gives birth to another son. And Rachel names the second son as well. What does she say? Naftule Elokim Niftalti. I have become attached with my sister. Meaning, my sister has children, I also have children. Not directly, but at least through my maidservant. I'm now attached to my sister. Gam Yocholti, I've prevailed. And that's what she calls a Naftali. The question over here is, this seems to be very wordy. Naftule Elokim Niftalti, what's the double word? Naftule Elokim, twice Niftalti. I've become attached. What's the emphasis on Elokim Niftalti? In the middle of Naftule, she says Elokim Niftalti. And what does it also mean? Gam Yocholti. Again, it's not really a question, but we'll soon see in the answer, every word over here sparkles. Gam Yocholti. I have also prevailed. What is this also? Okay. Question number 24. It says when Leah saw that she stopped giving birth, okay, remember Leah had 4 children, Yehudah, then she stopped. So now she did the same thing. She took her maidservant and she gave it to Yaakov for a wife. Here's an interesting thing. Take a look at the difference between the two mothers. Rachel, when she's bringing Bilhah, has a whole discussion. She seems to have discussed it with Yaakov first. First she complained. Yaakov answers her complaint, back and forth. They have a whole dialogue. Yaakov says, you're not like my grandmother. My grandmother did so and so. So Yaakov is kind of suggesting, you want to be like her, do like my grandmother. And she says, okay. So it's with the full consent of Yaakov. With Leah, it doesn't seem like there's any consent over here. She just takes Zilpah and she gives it to Yaakov. Doesn't even say that Yaakov knew about it. It's a little interesting. It's almost like Zilpah's got the same situation like Leah, that Yaakov doesn't even know who he's with. She goes and she brings him Zilpah, fine. Did they discuss it? Did they talk about it? No. So we need to understand, why is it that Zilpah is given to Yaakov so anonymously? I mean, he's assuming over here that Yaakov didn't even know that he was marrying Zilpah. It was like, okay, here she is. Question number 25. Rashi says over here that Bilhah and Zilpah, Bilhah was the maid of Rachel, Zilpah is the maid of Leah. Now remember earlier, Leah is the older sister, and Rachel is the younger sister, Gedola Ketana, right? Bilhah and Zilpah, Bilhah was older, and Zilpah was younger. The way it was always in the custom there at that time was, the older maidservant was for the older daughter, the younger maidservant, makes sense, the younger maidservant was for the younger daughter. Lavan, however, because he wanted to deceive Yaakov, that Yaakov shouldn't realize that he's playing a game with him, so during the wedding, he covered Leah, he veiled, so she couldn't see who the kala is, who the bride is. But the maidservant was not veiled. So what he did was, he brought Zilpah, who was the younger one, which should have been Rachel's maidservant, and he brought it to Leah to help deceive Yaakov. So really there was an exchange with the maidservants. But that itself we need to understand from a more spiritual place. If Zilpah really is the youngest, and therefore should match up with Rachel, why is she connected? In what sense is Zilpah connected to Leah? What's the spiritual bond between the two of them? That's the question. That was 25. Question number 26. Rashi says that when Zilpah gives birth, okay, now Zilpah is the last wife of Yaakov, she's going to become pregnant twice. But the Torah omits the pregnancy. The Torah just says, Leah brought Zilpah to Yaakov, and she gave birth to a child. That's what it says. Vatela Zilpah doesn't say, by all the other ones it says, it mentions the pregnancy. She conceived, and then she gave birth. Doesn't say it over here, just she gave birth. So Rashi says that Zilpah was very petite. She was young, she was small, and therefore the pregnancy was not noticed. So, without anybody noticing, Vatela, she gave birth. So we need to understand, according to this, what happened. That this first son, who's the one who's being born? God. According to this, comes out as an interesting thing. That God pops into the world unannounced. Usually when there's a pregnancy, people will talk. So, when are you expecting? What's your due date? Do you know? Is it a boy? Is it a girl? Is it expected? Because you see a pregnant woman, it's not a surprise. It's a known, everybody's expecting the Mazel Tov. But if the pregnancy was not noticed, so no one knew, suddenly, surprise, there's another tribe born. That means God entered the world unannounced. So the question is, why is it that God, out of all children, is a surprise baby? Now the truth is the second son, Asher, it says, was also the same thing. It says Vatela, doesn't say being pregnant. That means Zilpah was still small, and therefore the second pregnancy was also not noticed. But since it was the second baby that came unannounced, it wasn't such a surprise already, because people knew. Okay, you can't, that she might surprise us. Once you're expecting already a surprise, it's not a surprise anymore. But the first time the surprise happens, that's a surprise. So the real surprise baby is God. So we need to understand, why is God the surprise baby? Okay. Now when she names him, question number 27. When Leah names him, and this is in verse 11, when she names God, she calls him, she says, "V'tayim Leah ba God." So Rashi explains it means a mazel came. God means a mazel, a good omen came. In other words, she said Mazel Tov. A good mazel is here when God came. So the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, one of the translators of the Torah, the great sage Yonasan ben Uziel, says that the reason she exclaims in joy, Mazel Tov over here, like this, like an extra Mazel Tov. So the Targum says, Mazel Tova Biram, why? Benoya Sidin Lemera Sachsantoim Bekadmeisa Ma'arvele Yardana. Because this son is going to take the inheritance first in the other side of the Jordan. That's why Mazel Tov. But hold it, didn't we say that's a negative thing? We just explained that by Reuven, that there was almost like he was barred from coming into Israel, from taking possession of the land of Israel, because because there's some kind of a blemish in him. So if God is also together with Reuven, it's also, meaning everybody agrees that the land of God and Reuven is not on the level of holiness like Eretz Yisrael. So it's less. So what's the great Mazel Tov because of that? I mean, you can say it's because they got their inheritance first. Bekad Mesa. Yeah, it's a kvetch. That doesn't over the fact that they got an earlier land, but if it's not Eretz Yisrael, it's not as holy, it's not as special. So why would you make a big deal about that? It's not a compliment, that's what we're saying. So why do we, extra emphasis, Bagad, big Mazel Tov. Okay. Question number 28. Ooh, here's where it gets very, very, very beautiful. Okay. We're almost done the questions. We're 28, another 12 questions. And then again, the answer won't take too long because we're just going to go through it all. It's one theme, one idea. Okay, so bear with me. 28, it says Reuven goes out. Now we're going to talk about the birth of Yisachar and Zevulun. So Yisachar's birth. So Leah again had 4 children. She stopped having children. Now the Torah is going to say how Leah is going to have another child after the interruption. What happened? A little drama, story that went on over here, family politics. Reuven, it's the summertime, and Reuven is going out into the field at the time of the cutting of the wheat. And he finds these dudaim. It's a certain type of a flower. He finds these, I forgot to look it up, the English translation, how they translate the dudaim. I forgot the name. Anyways, he finds these dudaim in the field, and he brings them to Leah, his mother. Rachel sees it. She sees Leah having her child brought her flowers. And Rachel says, give me of those flowers. So now Leah suddenly turns extremely nasty, which is very strange. It looks, and she says, isn't it enough that you took my husband away from me? And now you're going to take my flowers as well? Okay. So Rachel says, okay, come on, calm down. She says, I'm not asking for free for the flowers. These flowers are very important to me. I'm willing to exchange. Tonight was supposed to be my night when Yaakov was supposed to be with me. And let's exchange. You give me the flowers. You can have Yaakov's with you. You can have, it's such a strange thing just to think about these women discussing who's he going to be with. But okay, that's the story. I guess you got to work it out. You got to have some kind of a rotation. What's it called again? Planner. If there's going to be more than one wife, I guess that's the. I understand very well. They made the prohibition about having more than one wife. In any case, the problems that this can cause. But in any case, so she says, you know what? Let's make an exchange. You take the flowers. Give me. Give me the flowers and you'll have Yaakov. She liked that. They made the deal. Then it says, so Yaakov is coming from the field in the evening, and Leah goes out to greet him, and she says to him, I know you were supposed to go to, they all have different tents. Says, I know you're making your way there, but you're coming to me tonight. I have dinner for you. Why? Because I hired you from the doom. And here again, the question is, it just seems a little bit unrefined to say, come to me because I paid for you tonight and you're having relations with me. But I paid for the flowers. And he was with her that night. That's what it says. Hashem listens to Leah, and she gave birth to a fifth son. And then Leah exclaims, God gave my reward. So initially she says, come to me because I hired you. And the word sachar, scharticha, has the word yisachar. I made a payment for you. Fine. Then she says, when she names him, she says, God gave me payment, reward, for giving my maidservant. She did the same thing like Rachel did. She also gave her maidservant. Now she's getting rewarded with similar to Rachel, who was going to later have Yosef as a reward for giving over. So I did the same thing. I get my reward. In other words, not because I paid with the flowers, nothing because of that. It's a different reason, seems like, over here. And she calls him Yisachar. Okay, that's the story. So now let's take a look, analyze a few questions. The next few questions are mainly on this story. Here's the question. Why is Reuven the one who's going out flower picking? What happened with the other boys? Come on, it's a whole group of sons over here. Why is Reuven hiking alone? Take along one of them. Shimon, Levi, get a buddy. Why is the Reuven the one that's wandering out into the fields? Okay. Not a big question, but still is a question. The Yonasan ben Uziel, again the Midrash, the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says that when it says B'yamei K'tzir Chitim, he went in the days of the cutting of the wheat, the Targum says that's in the month of Sivan. Okay, in the summer month, this is June probably, May, June, late May, June. And that's the time when you cut the wheat. Why is the Torah emphasizing that this was in Sivan? What's the emphasis? Well, whenever it happened, she brought flowers. Reuven brought flowers. Well, what's the emphasis? It was in Sivan. Now question number 30. In the end, he's not bringing wheat. Nothing happened with wheat. It was the time of the cutting of the wheat. But in the end, there was nothing to do with wheat. What he brought was flowers. Actually, Rashi says, if you can go collect something of value, food, this, that, why is he coming back with these dedoyim? Seems like, I don't know, maybe it wasn't such a nice flower. Just bring something up. So Rashi says that shows you how righteous they were. They weren't going to touch something that doesn't belong to them. But the flowers was ownerless. It's picked. Wildflowers, able to pick it. Fine, but if that's the case, so why tell me that it was k'tzir chitim if you're not even talking about the chitim? You're talking about the dudayim. Should have said Vayelech Reuven. Reuven went Vayimtza the dayim. He found the dayim. Okay, 31. What was Reuven's intentions that he's bringing these flowers to his mother? Obviously you say just because he wanted to do something nice for mom. He saw nice flowers, he's bringing flowers to his mom. But is there a deeper meaning why Reuven is bringing the flowers? Now some say it's because he knew how much Leah wants to be fertile. And it is said that Dudayim has a segula, has a special omen, a special, I don't know if you make tea with it, or you eat it, or you do something with it, or maybe just having it, I'm not exactly sure, is good to be fertile, for ovulation. So that's why he brought him the dime. And that's why Rachel wanted it so much. It wasn't just the pretty flowers. It was because she was desperate to become pregnant. Fine. But is there more to this story? Now the Medrash says, now question number 32. The Medrash says on the pasuk Vayelech Reuven that Reuven went. Again, it's Midrash Rabbah in our Parsha. On the pasuk Vayelech Reuven that Reuven went. So the Medrash says from here, you see, a good chinuch, if you educate children correctly, even when they become older, they will stick to the path that you educated them. It's a verse that says, educate a youth in the proper manner, so that when we will become old, gam ki yaskin, when he will become old, lo yasim and he won't depart from it. So the Medrash says, take a look, Reuven was educated really well. Now what? You see, he went out he brought whatever, he got to the dime. Where do you see when he become old, he won't depart from it? Many years later, the tribe of Reuven says to Moshe Rabbeinu, give us land on the other side of the Jordan. What's the connection? How does give us land on the other side of the Jordan somehow have to do with a good chinuch? Especially based on what we said before, that having land on the other side of the Jordan was not such a good thing. I say, oh, that's a really good chinuch. So I'll tell you what Mefarshim say, but then we'll get to his answer, which I think is much stronger. Mefarshim say that the connection, the Mefarshim on the Medrash say, the reason why Reuven came back with the dudayim and not with wheat or anything of other value was because, as we said earlier, he didn't want to touch anything that belonged, even something that you would say people didn't care about. He didn't want to touch anything that belonged. He was very careful. His moral standards was very high. This was passed on to his grandchildren. One of the reasons why they asked for land in the other side of the Jordan and not in the land of Israel was because they had so much livestock and they needed a lot of grazing field. And they felt that in the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, there wouldn't be enough grazing. And therefore their animals would go off into other people's lands. And that would be stealing. So they had it ingrained in them, so they wanted dafka these lands, so very good pasture lands, so you see that chinuch was really kept. Okay, that's an explanation. But perhaps there's another explanation of the connection between Reuven's dodayim and later asking for the thing over there. Question number 33. Leah's response to Rachel when Rachel asks for the dudayim. She says, is it too little for you that you took my husband? Now you're going to steal my flowers as well? And obviously that's like, are you kidding? You took my husband? You took my husband. I could have blown the whole thing that night. You would have been ran out of town. Yaakov would have never looked at you again. And I didn't. I let you. Yaakov was interested in me, not in you. I'm sharing my husband with you my entire life. What is it called? Matriarch privilege. I'm sharing my husband. All this, I did you a favor. And she's telling her, you took my husband? Strange. Yaakov worked for Rachel for 7 years. And how does she call him? Ishi, my husband. If anything, it's your husband, and I can hang around over here. Doesn't seem right. Another thing, here's your sister who was so kind and so giving to you and made such a sacrifice to you. And now when she's begging you for these little flowers that can help her, you're the one with the children. She doesn't have any children. This will help her. She believes it will help her. Possibly can give her a child. You can't return the favor. Give her a few of those flowers. You'll send Reuven tomorrow to get you more flowers. But give her some of your flowers. At least pay back something for the kindness your sister did to you. Strange that she didn't do that. Question 35. When Rachel says, okay, give me the flowers, you can have Yaakov tonight. Rashi makes a strange comment. Rashi says that because of that, Rachel was punished. Because she cheapened the intimacy with the tzaddik, she had an opportunity to be with Yaakov one night. She just, she sold it for a little bit of flowers. That's, in a sense, she disregarded or she devalued the merit of being with Yaakov. So that came back to haunt her. Because of that, she was punished. That she was not buried with Yaakov. She was buried out alone. She doesn't merit to be with Yaakov, close to him. Seems to be a really bad, a really big punishment, right? But the question over here is, we know that Rachel not being buried in Ma'aretz HaMachpelah, not being buried in the cave of the patriarchs and the matriarchs in Hebron, was for a much higher reason. We know that Rachel is buried over there because over there she can be to an assistance to her children. We're soon going to discuss this. It's very important, crucial to the whole discussion here tonight. That Rachel sacrifice is over there to play the most magnificent role. That she's the one who's going to beseech God. Two things. When the Jewish people went to exile, they were able to pass by her gravesite. And they went through that route when they were leaving Jerusalem. And they were able to pray, and Rachel comforted them. And she's crying to God on their behalf. And also in the end of days, she's the one who elicits God's promise that Hashem is going to return the Jewish people to the land of Israel because she's not buried in Ma'aretz HaMachpelah. So you see, there's a much higher, deeper reason why she's not buried there. Not a punishment. So which one is it? That's the question. Question 36. When it comes, okay, so as a result of this exchange, what happens? Yaakov goes to Leah, and Leah becomes pregnant. She has a baby. She calls him Yisachar. Now, Sachar comes from the word schar, reward. The simple reason for that is she paid. She paid with her flowers. But that's not what she says when she names him. She says, I paid, God gave me my reward, as I mentioned earlier, for giving Zilpah, my maidservant, to Yaakov. So the question is, that she gave, if that's the case, this that she gave Zilpah, her maidservant, to Yaakov, and for that God is paying, has nothing to do with the Daidayim, with the flowers. So then if that's the case, why does the Torah tell you this whole story? Again, the Torah is telling you the whole story of the Daidayim to tell you how it came about, and obviously to explain the name, because the name is going to be Yisachar. But it seems like the name Yisachar is given because of something that she did unrelated to that earlier. And she had already 2 children because of that, 2 stepchildren. Gad and Asher were born. So, and has nothing to do with the Daidayim. So why do you tell me a story with flowers if that's unrelated to this? And that leads you to question number 37. Now, the first question, 36, is, earlier it seems like when she speaks to Yaakov, she says, Sachar scharticha, I have hired you, which is related to these dudayim, to the flowers. And suddenly she switches. When she names him, she's giving another reason, as we say, payment for, it's a reward for me giving up, for bringing in my maidservant. Allowing a competition. That's 36. Which one really is it? The Torah seems to be giving 2 other reasons, one pasuk after the other. The other question, 37, is what I was mentioning before. And that is, for the second reason, it has nothing to do with the Dodayim. If so, what? If that's the reason for the name, then the Torah doesn't have to tell you this whole thing. The Torah could just said that Leah became pregnant again. She had a fifth child, and skipped the whole story of the time. And we would have a good reason why she called him Yisachar, as we said earlier, because she's now being paid back for what she's done, and giving away and allowing Zilpah, the competitor, in. Okay. Question 38. The name Yisachar comes from the word schar. Whichever way we're going to say the schar is, hired Yaakov, or paid for it, or payment for whatever, it's schar. So why does it have two shins? Or one shin and one sin? I'm sorry, two sins, but one of them is pronounced. We say there's two sins, but one is a pronounced sin and one is not. Yisachar, but it's spelled Yisaschar. What are the two sins there? That's the question. Question 39 is a question that is not related directly to the psukim. That's 39, and question 40, and with this we conclude. It's related to something the Midrash tells us in Rus, Perek Ches, Aleph. Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana says, there's a pasuk that says, Rigzu v'al tachto. Rigzu means fear, tremble, and don't sin. Imru b'lvavchem, say in your heart, al mishkavchem, on your bed. So the Midrash says that King David, it's a pasuk in Tehillim, King David is saying in front of God, people are always angering me. People are always teasing me. I'm being abused because of my lineage. David was an outcast. He was the black sheep in the family, and others made fun of him, and what were they always, what was the slander or whatever they were saying against David, that his lineage is not so kosher. He comes from this Moabite woman, a Giores, was kosher, was not kosher. And you're not allowed to marry a Moabite. Moabite is not allowed to come into the Jewish people. So, then it was explained it's only a man, not a woman, whatever. But there was always a cloud of question on King David's lineage. So he said, how much are they? Why how much are they teasing me that they keep on v'oimrim? And they say, Loi psul mishpachu, doesn't he come from a non-kosher family? His family is blemished. V'loi merus hamoy aviyahu, and doesn't he come from Rus the Moabite? And David says, I don't get that they say that to me, because they're hypocrites. Because imru b'vavchem, the answer to say back to the rest of the Jewish people, say into your own hearts, which means answer yourself, al mishkavchem, check your own bed, which means check your own lineage. Why? You come from two sisters. We know halachically you're not allowed to marry two sisters. Yaakov married two sisters. So there's a blemish there in the whole birth of the Jewish people. And the rest of the tribe of David, of Yehudah, that also teased David. They were not grandchildren from Rus, but they would tell David them, and so they were also teasing, and for them, David had also an answer. Tamar and Yehudah, and their children, which means the entire tribe of Yehudah, is also not so kosher. As we know the story of Tamar and Yehudah later. He thought she was a harlot, a prostitute, ganze Maisa. So, that's the pasuk. That's what the Midrash says. David is kind of answering and saying, well, why do they constantly harass me when they have the same blemishes like I do? The Mefarshim say, what's the answer? I mean, you got your problem, You're going to sit and point, you too have a problem. How does that answer your problem? Yeah, we all share the problem of two sisters. We'll have to deal with that. But you got something specific. And that is that your grandmother was not kosher. So that how do you answer that by saying you have another problem? Okay, fine. First of all, we're all in the same boat regarding that, but it's still different because, for whatever reason, whether it's before the Torah was given, that you were allowed to marry two sisters. We're not going to go there. But again, it's like you say, two wrongs don't make it right. The fact that there is another blemish, how does that answer? It doesn't seem like a true, a valid answer. And also, when it says that they were teasing David, it says David says they bother me with two things. They say, isn't this a psul mishpacha? Isn't this a blemish in the family? And also, what's with Rus? But hold it, the blemish in the family is Rus. What are the two things over here that there is a question about Ruth, and some kind of a blemish in the family? And finally, the last question, and then we'll wrap and we'll get to the answer of all of this. The Talmud tells us in Masechtas Pesachim that in the end of when Mashiach will come, at the time of the redemption, there will be a big feast, and God is going to make the major big feast. And there's going to be this big fish, and the Shor HaBor, and this big barbecue. It's going to be a beautiful time. And after this major feast, social distancing will be over. There'll be thousands upon thousands of people there. We won't wear any masks. It will all be good. And we won't have to be afraid that the newspapers will catch on to the story that there was a Hasidic wedding without masks. Everybody, Corona will be gone. The real Corona will be here, which is the coronation of God. And everything will be great. It will come time to bench, and they're going to give the cup of benching to Abraham, to Avraham. And Avraham is going to decline because he's going to say, I can't bench. I had a son, Yishmael. I didn't do so well. Some of my children were not okay. They'll pass the cup on to Yitzchak and honor him with benching, and Yitzchak will say, I can't bench because I had a son, Esav. And that makes me, I'm uncomfortable. I didn't do so well in this world. I don't feel like I can bench. And then they'll pass it on to Yaakov, and Yaakov will decline because Yaakov will say, I married two sisters. So it will continue. King David will pick up the cup, and he'll say, I should bench. I deserve to bench, and he will pick up the cup gleefully and feeling perfectly fine, and he will bench. So the question over here is twofold. Number one, why in the world, at the time of the redemption, at the time when everything is reaching its utter perfection, and after it's reaching its peak, we're holding by the benching, we're suddenly going to stand over there and we're going to start pointing out the faults of all of our patriarchs. I understand if we need to do our laundry, you need to do some in-house, cleaning. Do it at another time, right now, at the Giyul, at the highest moment of glory. We're starting to point out, we're shining the spotlight on that tiny little blemish that Avraham Avinu has, or Yitzchak. It doesn't make any sense. Why would that happen? Secondly, if anybody has, if they have a problem, what's their problem? Because of their lineage. Not in them, but in their children. And what does David HaMelech has? David HaMelech has got he's got skeletons in his closet. He's got his own problem in terms of his ancestry. It's a lot of not kosher stuff going on over there. Again, you got David, you got Rus, and you got Yehudah and Tamar. You got Lot and his two daughters. There's nothing to be proud of over there. There's a whole bunch of dark stories. So if Avram and Yitzchak and all these are disqualified and Yaakov because of two sisters, and what does King David have? Why is he okay? And more than that, you see that when people will tease David and enrage him because of his ancestry, what's his answer? His answer is, you know better than me. Yaakov married two sisters. That means he's equating himself. If there's a blemish there, there's a blemish here. So he's equal. So then what puts him in a better position that he should bench over them? Chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek. We finished 40 questions. All of this is going to be answered as follows. It's worth listening to the end. I know you're tired. I know I'm tired. And it's a little bit of a long class, but it's worth it. We'll begin with what it says in the Midrash. The Midrash says, and this is again a famous Midrash, and really I should have taken the Midrash out and read the whole Midrash, but it's long, and I also couldn't find the Midrash before. I don't know where the book disappeared. So I only have the abridged version over here. It's in the introduction to Eicha. It says, Amar Reb Shmuel bar Nachman. Reb Shmuel bar Nachman says, at the time when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Avram Avinu came and he tried to defend the Jewish people. And I think the Midrash goes on to say what the argument was, back and forth. God did not listen. God dismisses Abraham. Yitzchak comes. Yaakov comes. Moshe comes. It goes through a whole list of their arguments, and each one of them God disregards. Finally, Rachel comes. Rachel comes. And she jumps in front of God. And she says, Ribono shel Olam, Master of the world, Golo v'lefanecha, it is known before you, Yaakov avdecha ohevani ava yasera. That Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov our father, my husband Yaakov, loved me with immense love. Va'avad b'shvili sheva shanim, and worked for me for 7 years. And when it came the time of my marriage, my father schemed a horrible scam to switch me for my sister. And I've been waiting for my husband for 7 years in breathless anticipation for my marriage with him. I was gushing with love. Yaakov, for the tzaddik that he was, for the righteous person that he was, for the beauty that he was. It says Yaakov was one of the most splendid of people. She had every reason, physical, spiritual, on every dimension, especially it was her soulmate. And the future of all of her love to Yaakov was like beyond, and Yaakov's love to her was incredible love. And when I saw what's going on, Visavalti as tavasi, I swallowed my passion. I endured my passion. And I had mercy on my sister. She should not go out to embarrassment. I gave over to my sister all the signs. Because remember, she said earlier, there were signs. And basically, because Rachel says to God, what are you doing? These are your children. And God says, what do you mean? They angered me. And God says, they brought my competitor in. That's what Hashem says. They brought idols into the temple. They disgraced me. They exchanged me for someone else. So Rachel says, you're so offended. And I was also exchanged for someone else. And she goes on to describe this whole description. And she says, and yet I was able to overcome my hurt and my pain and allowed that to happen and swallowed it all. And not only that, but I actually helped my sister out. And when Hashem hears the argument of Rachel for that offense, immediately God is overwhelmed with compassion and pity. And he says, she is the one. Her argument wins. Because of her, I'm bringing the Jewish people back. Because of our mother Rachel. And that's the verse that says, Kol barama nishma, the voice that's being heard very high. Rachel mavakol b'nei, Rachel is crying for her children. And God says to her, don't be afraid. Stop crying, God tells Rachel. Why? Yesh schar lepulasech. There is reward to your actions. That she did will bring the geula, will bring the redemption. The shavu banim legvulam, the Jewish people will return. Children will return to their boundaries. That's the synopsis of the Midrash. So it's also stated in another Midrash. That's in Eicha. It's in the Midrash in front of Lamentations. And then in Midrash Rabbah, over here, it says that Yaakov Avinu, why did he put Rachel on the road? Why didn't he bury her in a more respectful place? He put her right on the side of the road. Yaakov Avinu saw the exile, and he saw his children passing through this place. He put her there that she should plead on their behalf. And again, that brings the verse, Kol barama nishma. So what do we see from here? That it was Rachel's sacrifice, this unbelievable, superhuman, completely incomprehensible sacrifice that she did. Again, as we said earlier, she did not know even that she would now be chosen and still be the second wife. She would be, and in a sense, it was known that one of them will marry Yaakov and the other one will marry the savage, wicked man, ruthless person, notorious killer and rapist, Esav. That's what they said. The older one will go to... So, till now, Rachel was going to go to Yaakov, and Leah was... Sadly, that's why Leah was crying, because she believed that she would marry Esav. That's what people were saying. So that was what people thought it would be. So Rachel is now basically in a state where that might happen, that might be a lot, and yet she does what she does for her sister. Her sensitivity goes beyond what a human being can do. And because of this, and this argument that she's going to make is going to be the winning argument, and this is going to evoke, and whether it evoked already, again, this promise then, or this is something that is still going on and evoking constantly, or at the moment of the redemption that we're hoping for any second, this is the argument. So with this, we'll understand, well, again, the order, it's a little complicated, this whole thing, because we have to go through all the questions. I did mark down over here which questions we're going to answer first. We're not going to answer them in the order we presented them, but different questions are going to be answered at different points. So this will explain two of the questions, question number 4 and question number 5, regarding the kiss that Yaakov kissed. Why does the Torah describe to us, even if it did happen, because it was intense love at first sight, and even if you're going to say, why does the Torah have to tell us about that kiss? And number 2, why did Yaakov cry? So, this whole story, as we're going to see right now, was creating and making possible the redemption. We're going to see that the entire story, both the marriage of Yaakov to Leah and everything that's happening, the jealousy, Rachel to Leah, the whole birth of all the children, it's all evolving. It's not just building the Jewish people, it's building the crown jewel of Israel, and that's Mashiach, and whatever it will take to make and enable the Geula to take place, the redemption to take place. This is really the story of laying the foundation for Mashiach, for the final redemption. So there's 2 parts over here. It's the creation of Mashiach, and as we're going to see soon, one mother is in charge of that. And then there is taking care of the Jewish people during the time of the exile, which is the work of the other mother. It's together between Leah and Rachel that they formulate and they bring about the ultimate master plan of God and the redemption for Israel, and ultimately, consequently, the redemption of the world. So, when the Torah tells us about the love at first sight and that kiss that happened between Yaakov and Rachel, is because that's leading up to this great story of Rachel's sacrifice, which is going to be the most important argument in all of history ever to be made, to plead the ultimate case. So in order for that to happen, everything, the details that are going to be said are in order to magnify that. You see, the Torah wants to tell you how intense the love was. As you see, Rachel says to God, when she pleads her case, she says, my husband loved me. What does she say the word? Ava Yasera, with incredible love. And obviously it was mutual love. So my love to my husband was beyond. And then she describes the pain and the suffering that she had when she had to give this up. So as a result of that, she says, that's why the Torah describes the kiss, which shows that the first time they met, they were already deep in love because of the immense connection that these 2 super souls had. They were destined for each other, and this is the entire future. This is the dream couple, the dream union that from all of time was waiting to happen. So you can imagine the spiritual pull that they had. Now, we'll also explain the crying. And as we said before, why did Yaakov cry? This was question number 5. It says that Yaakov cried. We asked the question, is this a time for crying? Because he's not going to be buried with her. It wasn't that he cried just because he's not going to be buried with her. Okay, we'll worry about the funeral later. Why he was crying it wasn't that he wasn't buried with her. When he realized that he wasn't buried with her, she's not going to be buried with him, he knew where she's going to be buried. She's buried on the road. Burying Rachel on the road, as we said before, was because there's going to be an exile, and the Jewish people are going to go to exile. So at this moment, when Yaakov is beholding Rachel at this first meeting, and sees her being buried over there, this is such a dominating factor about Rachel, that she's going to be the protecting mother of the Jewish people during the exile. She is the watchful mother. She is the source of protection for the Jewish people through the entire enduring exile. So when you embrace this person and you kiss this person, you feel their energy, you feel their identity, you feel the exile, that she is going to be the one who is the caretaker of the Jewish people during the exile. So how can the father, who, by the way, Yaakov's attribute is the attribute of mercy, how can the father, who's now experiencing the long, bitter, endless exile of the Jewish people with all its suffering, while he's holding his beloved wife, who is the guardian angel during that exile. So when he sees and feels the entire exile, of course Yaakov is crying. He's weeping for the exile of the Jewish people. Actually, the Shloh HaKadosh says that when Rachel is coming with the sheep, he also asks the question, why is he crying? And he explains this idea, this concept that he's bringing over here in this Sefer, Lakutei Basel Lakutei. He really attributes this to the Shloh. He says what Yaakov is feeling now is the galus. And he says an interesting thing. He says that it says, V'hine Rachel ba imatzon. Rachel is coming with the sheep. He brings a pasuk that says, God refers to the Jewish people, Ve'etein tsoni tson mar'isi adam atem. I think that I might not be quoting the exact verse, but the pasuk says, I will give them as my flock of my pasture. You are man. So he explains the Shloh. He says that the Jewish people are referred to both as a flock and man. During the time of exile, we're called a flock, because we're not on the level then called man. After the Geula, after Mashiach comes, then we rise up to be considered man. When it says Rachel ba imatzon, this is an indication. And Rachel, by the way, the name Rachel, as we're going to see in this whole idea, Rachel is the matriarch of exile. Her role and her mission is to defend the Jewish people, up to the final stage. She doesn't play the final role. That's going to be Leah, as we're going to see soon. But Rachel plays the role as during the exile period, during the period of Rachel ba imatzon, when the Jewish people are called sheep. And Rachel actually itself means a female sheep. And that's the concept that we know so Kabbalistically, that Rachel is the Shekhinah, and the Shekhinah goes with the Jewish people in exile. So when Yaakov beholds the Shekhinah and all the pain and all the sorrow, of course he breaks down crying. And that's that pain. Okay. Now, one of the questions we asked, this will also explain, we asked the question earlier. This was question number 13 and question number 14. It says after Yaakov, after he was tricked and he married Leah, so then he gets Rachel also as a wife. He makes a new deal with Lavan. And it says he loved Rachel gam. He also loved Rachel. Vayav games Rachel. He also loved Rachel, Leah, and then it implies more than Leah. We asked the question, is he also loving her, or is he loving her more? And also, why does the Torah have to tell you over here that he loves her when we told her that he loved her earlier? See, the idea is like this. Yaakov loved Rachel. But as much as he loved her a million times more after she did what she did. Why did his love increase? Because Yaakov saw that she would be the defense for her children. She would be the ultimate. She would come at the 11th hour, when there is that great danger, God forbid, that the redemption would never happen. She is going to be the one who is going to save the Jewish people for all of eternity from exile. And what is going to be her argument? Her superhuman sacrifice that she made, that she was willing to give everything away. That would be the argument that's going to win over the final argument. When Yaakov, after she did that, and he realized what she did, and he knew the future of what that is going to lead to, his love to her knew no bounds for how extraordinary of a woman she is. And that's why the Torah says now, it said earlier that he loved her, but now Vayehav, and it says Gam, it says he also loved her. What does it mean also? Es Rachel Leah. So he learns, the meaning over here is, he loves Rachel now more because of what she did from Leah. In other words, from what Rachel just did with Leah, that she allowed for Leah to go instead of him, which on the one hand could have been a big offense and hurt Yaakov, but when he appreciated what she really did, his love to her was just boundless when he saw the selflessness in the most selfless of selflessness, and the fact that this would lead to the ultimate redemption and the saving of the Jewish people and the saving of the world and so on and so forth. His love to her had no bounds, and that's the meaning of it. Well, this will also explain and understand question number 9. The question number 9 was, why did God, if God wanted Yaakov to marry her, why did Hashem had to deceive it? Why couldn't he just leave the marriage just go? And then Hashem would have brought that Yaakov would, know that he has to marry, both of them. Why was it that he's intending only her, and then God sneaks her in? The answer is because all of this was orchestrated by Hashem. See, ultimately, who is the one who's preparing Rachel for this job? It's God doing it. So God has to set the stage that Rachel should make the ultimate sacrifice, and then she'll be able to pull that card when she has to pull that card, the ultimate card. So for that, it has to be that Yaakov is intending to marry Rachel, and Rachel could have been selfish. Well, we wouldn't even call it selfish. She just could have been taking care of herself. And now she's not doing that. So that's the reason why Hashem had to make it this way. We'll soon see this is from Rachel's. In other words, we're going to soon see that God is keeping it from Yaakov, this whole trickery in the marriage, for both sakes, for Rachel to be able to play her role, and for Leah to be able to play her role. Leah's role will also require this deception for Leah's role. But Rachel's role, it requires, because again, her role is the sacrifice itself, the defense of the Jewish people. So she had to be in the position where she was placed in that position with this superhuman test, and she passed the test. Now we'll also understand, we asked in question number 22, when Rachel gave her maidservant Bilhah to Yaakov, she says, Danani Elokim, God's judging me. Gave her a child, God is judging me. We asked the question, what did Rachel sin? Why would she be judged? So here's a very interesting part of this whole story. And that is that Rachel, after she did what she did, was plagued by guilt. She had, in other words, it wasn't like, okay, yeah, it's all bashert, perfectly. This was all God doing it because one day you're going to use this argument. Rachel doesn't know this. Yaakov maybe knew it in some vision. Rachel doesn't know it. She cared for her sister. That's all at this point. She doesn't even know this whole story later, what's going to happen. She cared for her sister. And she made that sacrifice. But in her mind afterwards, she's thinking, I cared for my sister, but I hurt my husband. By allowing this scam to go on, how did I do this to my husband? He's waiting for me, and now it was, and now. So she felt that there's perhaps that her pain that she caused for the tzaddik Yaakov, she offended him or hurt him or was part of the scam. She played along with the scam. She even helped it out, not just went along, but she made it work. Without her participation, it wouldn't have worked. That was like a stab in the back to Yaakov. She always had thoughts that might have been a sin. And she thought that that's what's preventing her from having children. That's sin. So that's why the Alshach has a long discussion on this. And that's the reason why she says, when her maidservant gave birth, she says, okay, the Nani Elokim, God has judged me. Now I see. I was punished. I didn't have children till now. My maidservant just marries Yaakov and instantly she has a child. And I don't, for me it's taking a long time, or I didn't have a child yet. So you see, God has judged me. That's the meaning of the name. Okay, hopefully, like you say in Yiddish, kapara. I got punished, and now the slate is clean. When Bilhah has a second child, right away thereafter, Rachel is now thinking, hold it. If this was just a punishment that God had to remove my blemish. Again, she did the most heroic act, but she's feeling guilty about it. Sounds Jewish, right? So she's feeling guilty about it. So if it would have been just a judgment, then it would have been enough. She had one child, and that's my punishment. I had to be delayed with having children. And now, hopefully, the fact that she had now a second child, which, again, I didn't get this so well, but it seems almost like there's no explanation for that, is a sign that I'm misreading the whole thing. Meaning there is no blemish. And I never did anything wrong. My going along with this whole scheme I'm not joining my crooked father. I'm not being a co-conspirator with Lavan's how do they call it in a crime where you become an assistant to the crime. I'm not assisting him, I'm assisting God in some vast eternal plan. That's what she says, Naftule Eloikim Niftalti. Naftule comes from the word scheming. One of the words of Naftule comes from the word something that's crooked. Maloshin pitel, like Rashi says, something that's like. So she's saying God is webbing a web. And Naftule Eloikim Niftalti. I was just joining along in a vast godly plan. No, she realized that there was some kind of, she always, again, she was in doubt. Was this a bad thing or was it a good thing? Or is there something, now, in truth, it was a good thing because God was providing her with this argument that she would use. And that's why this whole thing had to happen. But she realizes it now. So she says, Naftule Elikim Niftalti. This is a divine. And she adds, Gam Yocholti. She realizes the fact that I was able to win, that I was able to overcome this superhuman test that no human being should ever be able to be tested, was also because God assisted me. That's what I'm saying. God orchestrated this. Gam Yocholti, the fact that I was able to withstand this and do what goes against every fiber of my being, such sacrifice, was because the Eibishter wanted this. God wanted this. So that what? She didn't know exactly what, but she knows it's a divine scheme. Something is happening over here from above. This will also explain question number 21 and 34. We said earlier that when Yaakov says to Rachel, my grandmother Sarah brought my grandmother Sarah brought a maidservant into the house. She brought her competitor into the house, and you didn't. And we asked earlier, and why didn't Rachel say, what do you mean I didn't? Of course I did. I allowed Leah to come in. Rachel didn't say that. Because since saying that would have meant that she has a merit now. What's her merit? Because she let Leah in, there should be a merit that she should have a child. That would have been devastating. Why would that be devastating? Because Rachel, this is the most important thing that Rachel needs to have, an unpaid credit. An act of sacrifice that was never paid. Had Rachel used this now, she said, oh yeah, I gave you Leah, and therefore I should have children. She would have claimed payment. Well, having children is a big thing, especially if these are tribes of Israel, the Jewish people. This would have been paid up. She would never be able to pull this card out to God and say, you know what, you owe me one for what I have done. And I went unpaid, and now I'm expecting that you should have mercy on my children, and you should do the same thing, and go past your honor, and you're insulted or you're offended. But in order for her to be able to do that, she could not use this. And that's the reason why she didn't say that. She said, okay, I'll take Bilhah. I guess at some point, by now she figured it out, what it was. Again, I'm not sure about that. But the idea that it could not be, or maybe God made it that she knew that she can't touch this. This will also explain, again, question number 34, which was the way Leah treated Rachel. And Leah, first of all, two things. First of all, she says, you took my husband. She tells Lavan, you took my husband. As we said earlier? And more, why didn't she return the favor? She was so kind to her and give her over the signs. The least you can do, give over the silly flowers. Give over the flowers in exchange. But Leah also knew the secret. See, these are all great prophets. She also knew the secret. She knew what kind of sacrifice that was. And she knows that that's a jewel and a gem. That's a power. That's the most powerful act, one of the most powerful acts in all of history. If not the most powerful act. And therefore, if she was going to reward her and say, you did this for me, here's this in exchange, I'm giving you my flowers, and maybe you'll have children because of that, it too would have been a payback. She would have gained something from it. Rachel could not gain anything until she will argue that in front of God. So that's the reason why Leah does not say it to her. And quite on the contrary, doesn't even show her any gratitude for it. This has to be preserved. This has to be preserved for that great day, for that great moment. For Rachel's role. Now we will begin to see where the two mothers of the Jewish people, where they diverge one from each other. The Jewish people have two general states of existence. One is the darkness of exile, and one is the time of perfection, of light, of geula, of temple, of closeness to God. The days of Mashiach and the days of exile. The dark days and the bright days. Rachel is our caretaker, our mother during the dark days. Leah provides us with the bright days. She has her destiny. Where do we see that now? And that will explain why, when the Torah refers to one of the questions we had, when the Torah refers to the two daughters, one of them is called Hagdola, the great one, and the other one is called Katana. Which question was that? Hagdola and Katana. Question number 6. We said, why isn't it called Bechira, the older one, and Seira and Hagdola? Because there is the big role and there is the small role. As great as Rachel's role is in defending the Jewish people and saving us during the time of exile, still the time of exile is called small time, in compared to the time of redemption that's called big time. The awesome time of the redemption. So on the Medrash, the Gemara says in Masechtas Baba Basra, it says Ve'ene Leah rakos. It says the eyes of Leah were soft. And the Gemara asks, what does it mean soft? So again, Rashi says because she cried a lot. The Gemara says that Amar Rebbe Lazar, that the word rakos comes from the word arukos. Arukos means long. So he says it means that her gifts are long. She has longevity with her gifts. They're permanent. It means all of the things that are given to Leah are of permanence. For example, of her children, she has the Levites, which are also the family of the Kohanim. That's an eternal gift. Because once a Kohen, for all generations, forever and ever and ever and ever, there will be Kohanim. Will never be taken away. The next one, she's been given kingship. Kingship, it will last forever. Because once Mashiach restores the Davidic kingdom, it's for all of eternity. And that's what it means. Her gifts are arukos, they're long. Similar to that's the Gemara Masechtas Baba Basra, Daf Kuf Chav Gimel Lamed Beis. Medrash Rabbah also in Parshas Vayeitzei, Perek Ayin Tezvav, it refers to it for the name Gedola and Katana. Why is the first one called Gedola and the other one called Katana? Leah called Gedola, which means big. She says, Gedola b'matnoiseh, she has big gifts. And the Medrash says, Kahuna la'olam, she has the Kahuna forever. Malchus la'olam, she has kingship forever. Shem haktana Rachel, the name of the small one is Rachel. It means that her gifts are small. Why? Who are going to be her heroes? Yosef. Yosef was a king, but that kingdom doesn't last forever. Yosef was a temporary leader of the Jewish people. Shaul, it means it's not a lineage that will continue on. It's not for all of eternity. One of her children is King Saul. The kingdom is taken away from him. The glory was very glorious. The first king of the Jewish people doesn't last forever. So on and so forth. I probably mentioned Mordechai, Esther. These are glorious people, but it's not something that is going to be for all of eternity. And that's why it's called Gedola Katana. So that answers question number 6. But from this we see the two roles of the two women. Two mothers. By this, that the Torah putting this introduction. Well, Lavan shtei banos, and Lavan has 2 daughters. Shem Hagdola, Shem Haktana makes like an introduction to the Parsha. Once you're introducing these 2 mothers, it's basically giving us insight into the entire story that's going on over here. Because this is being prepared. This powerful family, the ultimate family, is being prepared. And again, the end of days are now being orchestrated. All the pieces of the puzzle, whatever is needed. Now, which brings us to the whole story of Leah, which is awesome. The sages tell us in Masechtas Sanhedrin, Mashiach comes as a surprise. Mashiach comes when we're least expecting it. I know we're now in a situation, we spoke so much about all the current events and things that are happening, and we kind of like figured out exactly how it was going to happen. Boom, 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 and then God throws a monkey wrench into all of it, and suddenly, boom, 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 what's going on? Wow. Calm it. We have to calm down, because we realize Mashiach comes in a surprise. That means it's not like we won't know before Mashiach coming that Mashiach is coming. We know, the Gemara gives us many signs. But the actual coming of it is going to surprise us all. How, from where, what, where, and when? Boom, there he is. when we least expected, from where we least expected it, boom. Mashiach has to come through the most unexpected ways. Now, the Arizal, and we spoke about this a lot in classes that we gave on Mashiach, and Mashiach Matters, and Parshas Vayeitzei, the whole story of Lot and all that. We discussed this idea a lot. There's a reason why he brings from the students of the Arizal, brings it from Sifsei Cohen, from the Shach, and he brings in the name of Rabbi Yaakov, that received from his teachers. Why does kingship, why does Malchus Beis David have to come? He relates this idea that Mashiach comes through deception, through the mind not getting it, not through a calculator, not in a way we can figure it out. And that's because since Mashiach is the one who does the final correction, the opposition to Mashiach is so intense that it's simply dangerous. So God has to trick the world in bringing Mashiach. It has to come, therefore it has to come through where in all the stories had to be situations where the unholy would not suspect. That it's like, when you're hiding something you have to hide things in places that is the least expected. So God has to hide Mashiach in the most unexpected of places. And that's why that's the story of Lot. We're talking about incest, Lot and his daughters. Yehudah and Tamar story with a prostitute, or at least it appeared to be a very not. And then Rus and Boaz, again, is also a story like that. Again, she's a Moabite woman. She comes to him in the middle of the night. It's not a normal marriage. She's, okay, I know, but they didn't actually consummate the marriage. But still, the whole story looked so unsneastig, and the marriage was like questionable, as we said earlier. Yishai, also a story with Yishai and his maidservant, which is the grandmother of David, where there was a whole... they thought that Yishai had relations with a married woman. And it was a crazy story, and which wasn't really true. It was really his wife, but there was a lot of cloud, a lot of tabloid talk. And the reason for that is to create to fool the Satan. That's the way it has to be. And that's the reason why. And you can see, by the way, this explains a lot of what's going on right now, and a lot of which I'm not going to get into. I'll leave it to your own measurement. But there's a lot of deception going on when it comes to the Geula, because it has to be that way. So now we'll understand that when Yaakov is marrying Leah, she's going to be the mother of Mashiach. The marriage itself had to happen not with in a manner of a cognitive decision. Not that Yaakov knows. There has to be some, because this is the first kernel of Mashiach, the family of the marriage that's going to produce the soul of Mashiach. Just like Yehudah and Tamar, one generation up, it's Yaakov and Leah. Not Yaakov and Rachel, but Yaakov and Leah. So God has to bring about, and again, in addition to what we said before, that from Rachel's perspective, in order for her to have her argument and for her to be able to play her role, she needs to deceive her way into this. She needs to be able to make that sacrifice. From Leah's role as well, Leah can't marry Yaakov in a direct way because then Mashiach couldn't come through that marriage. It had to be through tricking of the mind, a deception, and Yaakov was deceived. This will also explain why Yehudah, again, from Yaakov's children, which is going to be the lineage was going to be from Yehudah. And we asked one of the questions, this was question number 18. We asked, why was Yehudah the fourth child? Why couldn't Yehudah be earlier? And the answer is, because according to the way they figured it out, there was their figuring it out. How did they figure it out? Their figuring it out was that each one of the mothers are going to have 3 children. Once Leah had her Reuven, Shimon, Levi, it was expecting that she's now on birth control. She's not becoming pregnant again. No one expected. So when Yaakov was with Leah, there was an understanding. They were not this was not a planned baby. It was an accidental pregnancy. Boom! Like they didn't expect it. Why? Because Leah and Yehudah thought 4 women, 4. Why did it have to be an accidental pregnancy? Because Mashiach ba behesach hadas, when you're not expecting it. So that's why it had to be dafka the 4th child. because the first three were expected to be from Leah. So not only did Leah get married through a trickery to Yaakov, but the actual pregnancy that was going to be the father of Mashiach, Yehudah, had to come in an unexpected manner. Now we'll also understand one of the question number 24 and 26. When Leah takes Zilpah, her maidservant, that she gives to Yaakov. There too, he said, it seemed like there was no conversation. She took her, she gave it to Yaakov. Could be Yaakov didn't even realize that he's having relations with Zilpah. Like this, the whole thing, because there was no talk about it. And the reason for that is because the Midrash says in our Parsha that one of the descendants of Zilpah is Gad. And one of the descendants, the Midrash asks, the Midrash has a few opinions from which tribe does Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, come from. And the Midrash says, Eliyahu Mishal Gad. I'm not gonna. It's a little late, so I don't want to open up the Midrash. But the Midrash brings, because he comes from Eliyahu HaTishbi, that's how we call him. Comes from Tishbi, and Tishbi is in the province of a place called Gilad, and Gilad is in the lands of the Golan. It's in the lands of Gad. Golan, I think, is not good. I think it was the lands of Menashe, but it was out, and that's where he comes from. So from there we derive, according to one opinion, that Eliyahu, we're used to thinking Eliyahu is a Kohen, because he's Pinchas, but there's an opinion that he comes from Shevet Gad. So this will understand the reason why, since he's coming from and Eliyahu Hanavi, since he's coming from Mashiach, is also going to make us, who's the one who heralds in the redemption? Who announces the redemption? Eliyahu Hanavi comes together with Mashiach, or right before Mashiach comes. So the real surprise is not even Mashiach, if Eliyahu comes first. The real surprise is Eliyahu coming to tell us when we're not expecting. So Eliyahu is a surprise visitor. If that's the case, the birth of Eliyahu, first of all, the marriage that was going to produce Eliyahu had to be a surprise. It was a surprise to Yaakov. And secondly, remember one of the questions we asked, which was question 26, the Medrash said that when she says Bagad, that God was born to Zilpah, and he was the surprise baby, because you couldn't tell that she was pregnant. That means that no one knew. It was suddenly, where did this baby come from? Oh, Zilpah just had a baby. No one knew that she was pregnant. Again, this is the element of surprise. Dafka God, because God is Eliyahu. And now I'll also understand. There was another question that we asked, question number 25. Why was Zilpah designated to Leah to be her maid, even though she's the younger one? The answer is that since Zilpah is going to be the mother of God, which is the mother of Eliyahu the prophet, and Leah is the mother of Yehudah, just like the maidservant prepares for the mistress, she does everything, she does the preparation. So to the grandchild of Zilpah, who is Eliyahu Hanavi, comes and does the prep work for the master, who is Mashiach Tzidkenu. Mashiach is the master. Eliyahu comes to pave the road. So Zilpah is the maid of Leah. That's why God orchestrates it that way. But you have the same surprise element in Zilpah, in God, because this is, all these inyanim have to happen behesach hadas, without any prior knowledge, which I think is so pertinent to now, because we find ourselves in a confusion and we think we can figure it all out. We can't figure it out now. We don't know. God is pulling one on us. We don't know, but one thing we know for sure, from somewhere unexpected right now, Mashiach is coming. This now we'll also understand. Very geschmack. Question number 10. When Yaakov wakes up in the morning on that night when he was tricked and he married Leah, it says, Vehine He Leah. Behold, it is Leah. And it spells it with a yud. I'm sorry, it spells it with a vav. V'hinei hu Leah. It doesn't say v'hinei he Leah, it says v'hinei hu Leah. Why does it say, should have been he? Even we read it he, which means she, but how come it's as if, and he is Leah? The answer is, because in Parshas Vayera, in this week's Parsha further, by the birth of Yisachar, it says, Vayishkav imma balayla hu. It says, Yaakov slept with Leah, balayla hu, which means that night. But in the right grammatic Hebrew, it should have said, balayla hahu, on that night. So Rashi says, why does it omit the hey? So instead of saying balayla hu, which means that night, it's as if it is, Vayishkav imma balayla, he was with her at night. Who? He. Who is the he? He is referring to someone else who was with them that night. So Rashi says it's referring to God. That God was assisting because this was such a special moment. We'll soon see about that moment. We're going to get there in a moment. I'm going to get there in a few moments. But because the birth of Yisachar was so important, and because she put so much effort into having this extra baby. Again, this is Leah. So God particularly came down to help and to make sure the conception is happening. So God is there. Third party. In general, it says every time God is a partner in the creation of a child. But here, especially. So just like Rashi says over there that who is referring to him, and who's the him, the big him, the same is also over here. When it says, V'hinei hu Leah, it's not referring to it as she was Leah. V'hinei hu, there was someone orchestrating. God himself is there, making sure Leah is going instead of Rachel. Why? Because whenever it comes to Mashiach, since this is God's ultimate scheme, and ultimate desire is the coming of Mashiach, there's nothing more important than God's agenda than the bringing of Mashiach. So when it comes to planting the soul of Mashiach, God himself is doing it. And since, again, as we said before, it needs to be protected, so God deceives the Satan all the time, and he always goes and part of it was that Yaakov couldn't know that he's marrying Leah. And he knew who? It's God himself that's there at that moment. To make it even richer, the word who are the names, the letters that are going to be fixed when Mashiach comes. It says that there is a blemish in the Yud Kei Vav Kei, in the four letters of God's name. The Yud Hey is separated from the Vav and the Hey. When Mashiach comes, the name is going to be complete. So the Vav and the Hey of the word who is from and the Aleph is, it says, because God's throne is incomplete. Kisei, case Aleph, the Aleph is not there until Mashiach comes. So the Vav and the Hey has to be fixed. Ki Yad al case Ka, it's missing the Vav and the Hey, and the Kisei, the Aleph from Kisei. So when Mashiach comes, it will be who. So this is the repair. This is who. Mashiach is there. So then according to that, it's not God is there. It's Mashiach that was there in that night that Yaakov was deceived to marry Leah. This will now answer question number 7 and number 8. Again, I hope you're checking it off. Which ones are still, we're going to answer every single one of them. Be'ezrat Hashem, with God's help. This will answer 7 and 8. Why it says, give me my wife and I will come on to her. Which we asked before, it's not proper to do that. Rashi says because he's going to have children. So, one of the questions actually I forgot to say last time. I realized now I didn't say it. First of all, we said, why does he switch from, Rashi says, no one says that. And Rashi says, because he knew he has to have 12 tribes. And that's why he used such words, so that he can, that's why he's demanding so that he can have toldos, he can have children. Why does he switch from Shvatim to toldos? But one of the questions that I forgot to ask, which was actually question number 7, so if you were really writing it down, you might have missed that you don't have a question for 7. The question number 7 was, how come the word avaya, and I will come to her, I will have relations with her, is spelled with an extra vav? It's a full word. It's called mole, there's an extra vav over there. After the vase, vavaya could have been regularly spelled without that vav. Just vav aleph, the first vav, yeah, but vav aleph beis aleph hey. The extra vav over there. What's the extra vav? And the answer is like this. It says that when God created the world was in a perfect state. When Adam and Eve, when Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge, the world was denigrated. The world fell. And what was the fall of the world? It lost 6 things. The world had 6 qualities, and 6 of these qualities were diminished. Life forever, the taste of food, the brightness of the sun, the height of the human, a few of the things that Hashem took away. These are I think the radiance of the human being, different things that God removed because of the sin. 6 things. That's why when Yaakov was saying, he didn't even realize it, but bring me my wife, I'm going to have relations with her, meaning we're bringing Mashiach, we're going to restore that vav. That's why there's an extra vav in the word vavaya. And it also explains why Rashi is hinting to, and Rashi says toldos, because we also know that the word toldos is, every time it's mentioned in the Torah, it's missing one of the vavs, in the word toldos. It's not written full. In the beginning of creation, it's written full. The only 2 places it's written full. In the beginning of creation, Ela toldos shamayim va'aretz, these are the offspring of heaven, chronicles of heaven and earth. Over there it's written full. And also when it talks about the birth, Yehudah, when Tamar gives birth, and it says Ela toldos Peretz, when it speaks about Peretz's children, which Peretz is the family of Mashiach, son of Yehudah, it says again toldos full. So that it says because Mashiach is going to bring back the 6 things and he's going to complete the world. So that's why Rashi switches, just to hint to us, from Shvatim to Toldos, meaning that Yaakov was really concerned not just building the Jewish people, but primarily in building the Toldos that is going to be full, that's going to bring the world back to its ultimate perfection. With this, we'll also answer question number 12. Remember we asked question number 12, why did God make it that Yaakov married Leah not through giving her a ring or not through giving her monetary value, but the marriage actually took place through an intimacy, which is, as we said before, not proper. Why did Hashem do that? Now we understand why. Because the Jewish people are married to God. When we received the Torah, and for the last 3,333 years since we got married, we're still in the first stage of marriage, which means we never were intimate with God yet. We were just we were just betrothed. So in a sense, we're technically husband and wife, but there hasn't ever been this closeness. The real intimacy has never happened. Even though we had a temple and a second temple and all the prophets and all the great miracles, it's not considered an intimacy. When Mashiach will come, that's going to be the consummation of the marriage, and the amount of godliness we're going to experience is going to be considered as if, not just if, it literally is on the spiritual dynamics of things, that we are literally becoming one, like one flesh with God, one entity. The lights are going to turn on. The experiences of the divine are going to be so vast. It's going to be the ultimate union with Hashem. Since Mashiach is going to bring that into state, to hint to that and to facilitate that, the initial marriage of Yaakov to Leah was immediately in that marriage, since it was about the birth of Mashiach, which is going to be it's going to bring about the intimacy between us and Hashem. The marriage itself took place not through a betrothal, which would lead to an intimacy, but an intimacy immediately, because that was the content of that marriage. Now we'll also answer question number 11. We asked how come the difference by Rachel and Leah, that for Leah, Yaakov worked first, and then he got the prize, he got his wife. He didn't know, but in the reality it was that way. He worked for Lavan for Leah, thinking he's working for Rachel, but he worked for Leah, and he only got her after the 7 years. By Rachel it was the opposite. He got Rachel immediately and worked after. The answer is These two women represent two levels of work and two levels of reward. By Leah, the work comes first and then the reward, because the Leah represents Mashiach. Now, when do we create the lights of Mashiach? During the time of exile. We work during the time of exile. All the mitzvahs we do now will create Mashiach's world. When will the reward come? When will Mashiach reveal himself? And with all the revelations of the future? In the future. So therefore, by Leah, you do the work first, 7 years, could represent the 7 millennium, all the work that we do, and finally at the end we get the great reward, which is the revelation of Mashiach, and that is Leah. She contains the soul of Mashiach. She's the mother of Mashiach. Rachel is the opposite. In Rachel, the reward is she's our caretaker. She's what sustains us in exile. And how does she sustain us in exile? As soon as we left the exile, we passed Rachel's grave, and we heard Rachel crying on our behalf, and we heard her soothing words that she told us that don't worry, you're going to return. So by her, the reward comes before the work, because the reward is that we heard that Rachel comforts us. That comfort is there from before the exile. Before we even left to exile, we were already comforted with the comfort and the strengthening and what we get from her. So the reward is first. Then comes the work, which is the enduring exile itself. So the marriage of Rachel was also that way, that she came first before the work, because she represents the other dynamic of the Jewish people, the dynamic of the Zman HaGolus, the time of exile, and our mother during that time. Now we'll also understand question number 17. We say that after Yehudah was born, she stopped giving birth. But Tamay Mileda, she stopped giving birth. Why did she stop? Because again, the gifts of Leah are the big gifts, as we said before. The gifts that last for eternity. Kahuna and Malchus. The moment she got Malchus, the biggest gift came already. Vatamay Miledes. Yeah, technically she wanted children more. She was going to get Yisachar and Zvulun later. But the big prize, the ultimate prize, which is the real eternal gift. I mean, the Kahuna is a big one, but even bigger than that is the power is Melech HaMashiach and the Davidic kingdom and the Mashiach, which is going to be from. And therefore, as soon as that was done, Tamid Miledes, she's done. Her contribution was made. She delivered into the world in a gift for all of eternity. And now we'll also understand why Dafka by Yehudah she says, now I will think. Apam oida, now I will think. Because we're not talking, again, everything has symbolic. The thank you that we're talking about is the ultimate thank you. The thank you that's going to come to thank for the thank you of all thank yous. We're going to thank God for the Geulah. We're going to thank God for creating us. We're going to thank God for all the trouble and all the pain and all the suffering, because we're going to realize it was all worth it. And when is that going to come? After the festivities that are going to happen when Mashiach comes. After the glory that's going to be at that time, when we're going to have that feast with all the tzaddikim, with God. At the conclusion of all of that, we're going to bench. Who's going to lift the cup of benching? It's going to be Mashiach. And then that thank you, that King David is going to lift the cup up and he's going to say, Kois Yeshua's Esa, the cup of salvation I will lift and I will thank God. It would include every thank you that was ever uttered. It will be the ultimate thank you. In his thanks will be the thank yous, all the thank yous. So that's what she's saying. Apam oida, this is the great big hoida, the big thank you that's going to be from the one who benches koishal bracha after the Geulah, when we thank God for the Geulah. And that's what she's referring to. Now we'll also understand Rachel's envy. Because this, that she got married Yaakov and all of that, she was able to do with a full heart and everything. But after everything is said and done, her role, even though it's crucial and it's so great, but there was a little bit of, after all, Leah gave birth to Mashiach. the ultimate human being and the ultimate. True, without Rachel, it could never be facilitated. We're never going to make the transition from Golos to Gula. You need her, and obviously that's her comfort, and she's happy with her goal. But the idea that why she heard that envy, if she was envy just for children, why does the Torah say it only after Yehudah was born? It wasn't children. It was the child of all children, the ultimate nachas of the world, the child that we've all been waiting for, the man we've all been waiting for. That's Mashiach Tzidkeinu. It reminds me of Rabbunim of Peshischa, or the Chiddushei Arim, one of the great Gerer Rebbes. I'm not exactly sure who it. I think it was Rabbunim. He says, you watch the unfolding of the way the world works. He says people get married, they grow up, they get married, and they have children. And then they work and they work and they work to feed their family, to raise a family, difficult labor and work, so that they can raise their children. And finally, what's their ultimate dream? They want to bring their children to the chuppah. And they bring the children under the chuppah, which means under the marriage canopy. They get married and they have children. And the parents, the new couple, work and work crazy day and night to raise their children. And they raise their children and they raise their children. And then they finally, what's their dream? They want to bring them under the marriage canopy, marry them off. And they marry them off and they have, hopefully with God's help, they have children. And the couple works and works and works to raise their children. This is already the great-grandchildren. And they're working and working and they work until they raise the kids with all the hardships, till they go under the canopy and they get married and Mazel Tov and they have children. So basically everybody's working so you can have children. So he says, and I am waiting to see already that child that everybody has been working for. In other words, obviously mankind is always realizing that there's something. Why do we keep on producing? Because we're still moving to the goal, we realize. And we know the goal will come. I mean, obviously every person has intrinsic value, but there still is the... So that's why you can say that the envy, he says, of now, whatever that envy means, was on Mashiach that was born. Now let's conclude. We'll wrap it up. Now we'll understand the story with this is so good. This last part is gewaldic. So don't leave yet. I'm falling asleep here, but we'll stick it out. Now we'll understand the story with these doidoim, with the flowers. What's happening? Reuven is perturbed. He knows he was born from a mix-up. And he knows being born from a mix-up is not good. And he's riddled with insecurity. He's feeling not good about himself. He really is not. He was a mistake in the whole thing. He was a mistake. Because she became pregnant the first night. So he was born from he was an accident. And he knew this. And again, it wasn't just an accident like we said earlier, that God was an accidental, or Yehudah was an accidental birth. Here it was an accidental, he thought it was a different woman. The whole thing is no good. Reuven was really, really suffering from this. Talk about mental anguish. He needed therapy. He was very bothered by it. So Vayelech, he went out for a walk. He went to deal with his issues, so to speak. He went to deal with what's going on. Now this, by the way, he brings from the Bnei Yissaschar. And Sefer Agar Dekala, the Bnei Yissaschar has this idea, this pirush regarding this piece. Now what did we say? When did Reuven go? Reuven went at the time of the cutting of the wheat. And the Targum Yonasan says the cutting of the wheat was on Shavuos. So let me just stop for a moment. First of all, we're going to answer now. Let me just, so you want to check them off. We're going to answer question 28, 29, 30, 31, and 37. We're almost completed. These 5 questions. But let me stop for a moment. The Alshich, again, one of the great commentators from the 16th century, lived in the holy city of Tzfat, writes that the reason it emphasizes that it was Katsir Chit in the time of the cutting of the wheat. Which cutting of the wheat? In the Beis Hamikdash on Shavuos, you brought 2 breads. The day before that, they had to cut the wheat for the cutting of the wheat. So he says that day was the day of Shavuos, was the day of the cutting of the wheat. He asking, why did Leah be so insistent that she needs that night? She wanted to be with Yaakov that night. I mean, another night. Have to be that night. And that was the holiest night. That's the night of Shavuos by night, the giving of the Torah. And that's why it mentions Katsir Chitim, which is it was Erev Shavuos that he brought the flowers. And he explains a bunch of things in the verse. But one of the interesting things is, and that's why who was born that night? She became pregnant with who? With Yisachar. Yisachar, we know, is the great scholar, the Torah scholar, because he's born Shavuos by night, which is the night of the Torah is given. That's why he has the energy of the Torah inside of him. Based on that idea, let's go back to Reuven, who's wandering in the fields on Erev Shavuos, seeking an answer for this exchange, for his entire identity, for what he perceives as a wrong, that he was wronged from birth, but he knows it couldn't be. He knows there's a divine plan, but he's seeking an answer. And he got his answer. Vayeitzei daitayim. He found daitayim. The pasuk says, Matzasi David Avdi. I found David, my servant. God says, I found my servant David. I found Mashiach. I found David. Vayeitzei doidaim. The word doidaim, the first letters of the word doidaim is David. Vayeitzei David. He found David. And why did he find David? Because Shavuos is David HaMelech's birthday. Shavuos is also David HaMelech's Yortzeit. Is the day of his birth and the day of his passing. So Vayeitzei doidaim, he finds King David. And now Reuven says, oh, now I get it. Now I get it. This is Mashiach. This is the ultimate human being ever to live. And then he realizes the whole divine scheme and the whole divine plan, that this soul can't come into the world without deception. That's why my mother needed to be exchanged and my father needed to think it's Rachel, but it really was Leah, because there could not be a Mashiach comes through deception. Mashiach comes through surprise, through the unknowing, not through the knowing. So he realizes it. So he understands what the purpose of this mix-up is. That it was God's plan to bring about the ultimate birth of the ultimate human being. He saw that all. When he saw the Daidayim, you see how amazing the tribes were. He's looking at flowers and he sees David. This is not flowers, this is David. And now we understand perfectly why he brought it to his mother. Because he knew that his mother is also plagued by this whole thing, why she had to marry Yaakov in such a crooked way. So he brought the Daidam to his mother to explain, I find that this is it. This is one of your children. This is what you need to produce. Vayavai le'ima, he brought it to his mother. This is King David, this is Mashiach. When Leah saw the Daidam, she said, First of all, this answers the question, why when it says that he went out Katsir Chitim, but he's bringing Daidayim. So if you're bringing Daidayim, why are you telling me about Chitim? The Chitim tells you that it's Shavuos, because Shavuos is, we know that Torah is compared to wheat. Chita is Gematria 22, the 22 letters of the Torah. It's the time we bring the Shtei HaLechem, the 2 breads, which are made out of wheat. The whole Yom Tov, Pesach is barley, and Shavuos is wheat. So again, Shavuos, King David is born. So that's the whole explanation on the Daidayim. You're finding, who do we find in Shavuos? We find David HaMelech. Once Leah realizes this, Leah understands. Suddenly she was upgraded in her own mind. Her entire just like Reuven had a complete, this was therapeutic for Reuven, this healed him, it also healed Leah. Because now Leah is not looking at herself anymore as some secondary, tricked-in wife that, Yaakov did a favor, they had mercy on her, they didn't, her sister did her a favor, and she realized that she is the main wife, because Yaakov needs to produce. But the reason it had to come through a scheme is that it had to come through because it had to be through a deception. So immediately in the story, she suddenly has a whole different attitude, and she wanted to share it with Rachel. So she says, when Rachel says, give me the Daim, what does she say? Hamat kachteches ishi, you're taking my husband? Hey, we got to talk this over here. It's not your husband and I'm just a secondary. I'm just as important over here. She realizes her role now. She understands the reason why the whole thing was tricked wasn't because she's secondary, but because there's no other way that Yaakov can marry her. Only through a trick. That's why she refers to Yaakov now, my husband. His prized child is from me. And that's also going to explain question number 35. That when she explains why she's naming him Yisachar, again, the child that came out because of this intimacy that comes out of this, she says, because I gave my maidservant to my husband. And we asked earlier, giving the maidservant as unrelated to the flowers. If it's the payment for Rachel, we understand she paid with the flowers, she got Yaakov for the night. But otherwise, what's the story over here? What does that have to do? But now we get it. He says an interesting idea. He says, really, if she's a secondary wife, she's not really the main wife, who give her a right to take her maidservant and give it to Yaakov? Be happy that you're there. Be happy that you're not being expelled. You still bring, not only did she steal her way in over there, she's still bringing her maidservant. She did it because she was desperate for children. But it was a little bit, she never felt so good about it. Once she got the Daidaim, and once Reuven explained to her what it really is, and she now she understood why, that she's not a secondary wife. She's just as crucial as Rachel is. And in a sense, because she's going to give birth to Mashiach, she might even be on a higher, more primary to Yaakov. If that's the case, she is the mistress. She's not just, and she can give her maid. So now she says, because of the Daidaim, she says, God gave me my reward that I gave my maid. She's a right to give over. This justified that act as well. Now we'll also understand Rachel also got it. This was enlightening to Leah, but it was also enlightening to Rachel. Things started clicking in Rachel's head as well. The roles are beginning to become very clear. Rachel now understands the reason why Yaakov had to first fall in love with her and the whole thing, and that Leah is also a primary wife. But then what's my role? If she has the mother of Mashiach, what's my role? So Rachel realizes that my role is to be the caretaker of the Jewish people during the temporary time. It's not so temporary. It's been thousands of years of the harshest suffering. But I'm going to be the caring mother. Without Rachel, we forget it. We would never survive. Without those tears that she cries for us all the time, we would be nowhere. She realizes her role and she accepts it. And she does an act right now to demonstrate, not just demonstrate, but to facilitate that acceptance of her role, which again is the biggest Mesiras Nefesh. She's now again going to do an act of unbelievable sacrifice. She says to Leah, let Yaakov sleep with you tonight, which we say, Rashi says, as a result of that, she's punished, because she's cheapening the being with the tzaddik. and she's not buried with him. But it wasn't a mistake. She did it intentionally. She's now relinquishing her primary status. It's amazing. She's relinquishing her primary status up to Leah. You're the mother of Mashiach. You're going to be with Yaakov. With all the greatness of being with Yaakov, in Ma'aris HaMachpelah, you're going to be. I'm going out to sleep in the cold night. In the street. I'm going out to be there for my children. I'm going to do my role. What God has destined for me to be the mother of the Jewish people during the time of exile. I'm going to watch over my children. So this answers the question. Was it a punishment? Did she go there for, and they're both true. She's doing something cheapening the thing, but she's doing it on purposely. She's choosing that to dislodge herself as the main wife. I mean, it's not that she's not the main wife, but that she's, in this sense, the role of the dark times. Which obviously we can explain to say that that's higher than in the bright times. But again, each one in their own way. And that's why, let's take a look at the name Yisachar. We asked, why does Yisachar have two shins? Yisachar, two sins. Because the word Yisachar means schar, reward. In this, what really was going on over here, in this exchange, between the flowers from Leah to Rachel, and Rachel giving Yaakov now to Leah, and the child, what this produced was reward for Leah and rewards for Rachel, Both of them had a reward. So there's two shins because 2 times schar. And the word really spells yesh sachar. There is schar. 2 rewards. For Leah, the reward is she's having the son Yisachar, another tribe. For Rachel, the exchange of giving Yaakov away for that night. What's her reward for that? Is that she's going to be outside on the sidewalk in the street. She's buried on the street. But her reward is that she can defend the Jewish people when they need her most. And God will tell her, Yesh sachar lepulasech. There is reward to your actions. Now, it was the ultimate reward that God is going to allow Mashiach to come and the redemption to happen. That's the reward for Rachel. For what she did now. Again, her Mesiras, which is again connected to her first Mesiras Nefesh, because she's the one who has that card to play. Leah doesn't have that. She can defend the Jewish people and not Leah. And that's her Sachar. So the name Yisachar has 2 sins in it, 2 rewards. The rewards for Leah and the rewards for Rachel. And again, and the pasuk that God tells Rachel, he says, Yesh Sachar, that's Yisachar. There is reward. And one of them is a loud sin, Yisachar. You hear it. The other one is a silent sin. Why? Because the reward of Leah was immediately revealed. That's the shin we hear. It was immediately revealed. She had a baby, Yisachar, with all the qualities of Yisachar. The reward of Rachel is not going to be known until Mashiach comes. So therefore, it's not yet loud. It's still a silent reward. The sin is silent. Now we'll understand. This is so awesome. Okay, we're almost completed, but this is so awesome. What the Gemara means when David HaMelech says, Mashiach, David and Mashiach is one thing. By benching, he says, I should bench because... And I don't know, we asked the question, come on, everybody declined to bench. Everybody had a blemish. Some of them in their lineage. Yaakov marries two sisters, everybody's got a little something. And David the Melech, you don't. You yourself complain that everybody makes fun of you about your problems with your lineage. Why is he saying, I should bench? The answer over here is, when David says, I should bench, one of the things that are going to happen when Mashiach comes, the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke about this. And here's where you see the Rebbe's connection, so much like Mashiach. The Rebbe said from when I was a small boy, just 2 years old, before I went to Cheder, I began to imagine the Geula, the future redemption, the redemption of the Jewish people. Imagine a 2-year-old thinking, that's what he daydreams, that's what he fantasizes about the Geula. But he says, I was imagining it all my life in a manner in which the Jewish people are going to be able to say, Oitcha Hashem ki anaftabi, I'm thanking you, God, for you have rebuked me. In other words, it's not only going to be a Mashiach is going to come and we're not going to cry, he's going to wipe away our tears. When Mashiach is going to come, he's going to explain retroactively all the suffering. He's not going to explain it philosophically. His very coming and the goodness that he's going to introduce is going to be an answer to every pain and every suffering. And he's going to turn around the entire narrative. Everything that we saw as dark is suddenly going to become so bright because we're going to see the real story. We're going to see what it really means, what's really behind it. The darkness will disappear. It'll be a complete different story. And that's what David HaMelech is going to do when he picks up that cup and he's benching. David has a blemished King David has a blemished lineage. He has all the shame. He has all the guilt. He has all the scars that are etched in him deep from all that he's been through. And David HaMelech is going to pick up that cup and is going to, by him benching, he's going to say, thank you, God. He's going to reveal that all the blemishes and all the pain and all the darkness was all justified. It was all leading up to such a goodness. So it's not just going to be, so when David is benching, he's the answer. Remember what happened when Reuven picked up the David HaMelech, he found David. He said, now I understand why my mother was exchanged and why I'm a little messed up. It's not really messed up because this is all had to happen and for this ultimate purpose. And then it's not messed up because then this is part of the plan. I'm not messed. There's no sacrifice. It's just part of this vast, magnificent, eternal plan. So it's not like, everybody's going to leave. Avram is going to leave thinking, oh man, I messed up. I had a son Yishmael. Esav is going to, and Yitzchak is going to leave and say, I was kind of, I almost made it. I was almost the one chosen, but I had a son Esav. So, and Yaakov is going to say, I married 2 sisters, so I was a little foot. I married the. No. Once David HaMelech is going to bench, it's going to explain why Avram had a son Yishmael. It's going to explain why Yitzchak had a son Esav. It's going to explain why Yaakov had to marry 2 sisters. Well, Yaakov had to marry 2 sisters. We got the story now because of Mashiach. That's the only reason. It had to come through deception and all this cover-up and all this drama. With all the pain that it brought, everything was only for Mashiach. And that also, he brings this stunning thing. The reason why, again, Avram who has Yishmael. And why? That too is for Mashiach. Because we know that Yishmael is the father of the Muslims. And Esav is the father of Christianity. And Rambam writes in the laws of King of Mashiach that the whole purpose of Islam and the whole purpose of Christianity is to spread the Mashiach consciousness to the entire world. The idea of a messianic future, the idea of a good time, the idea, first of all, of the belief, monotheism, the belief in one God, and the concept of Mashiach. So the Rambam says that the whole Christianity and Islam is for the was from the very beginning was in order to pave the way for Mashiach. So again, this is exactly it. Avram is not going to feel guilty for Yishmael. Yitzchak is not going to feel guilty for Esav, because all of this is all part of one vast, incredible, infinite plan where everybody plays a role. The Muslims play the role. The Christians play the role. With all the suffering, with all the darkness, with all the horror, it will all make sense when David HaMelech will just pick that cup up. Kos Yeshua is Esa. Yes, explaining his own blemished genealogy, his own past, which will then vindicate every heartbreak, every darkness, no baggage left, no guilt left, healing for all of humanity, healing for all generations, all the way back to the beginning of time. This is the story. This will also answer us when they, question number 39, when they came on David and they said to him, your lineage, you come from Rus, the Moabite, and it's not kosher marriage, a Moabite woman. He says, well, and you guys come from two sisters? We asked before, two wrongs, just because he married two sisters, it makes her right? I'm not blemished because you're also blemished. The answer is it's the same reason. It's not two different reasons. The reason I come from Rus, the Moabite, I come from an outsider, I come from a woman that there's a whole question on her Jewishness, on her, or rather her ability to assimilate amongst the Jewish people. Why is the whole question there? It was there to hide the coming of Mashiach, to keep it a secret, to keep it all camouflaged. And why that's the same reason Yaakov married two. To ask yourself, why does God have to make the Jewish people come from a forbidden marriage, marrying two sisters? It had to be slipped in. Same idea. It's not. He's not giving you also have the same thing. He's explaining. Now let's just conclude with Reuven and God, because this is so great. We said that after all, Reuven and God are both born from kind of mistaken marriages. Reuven is born from that union, and God also, because we said that when Leah gave this, there was no discussion about it. It's possible that God was also born, and we say that, okay, Reuven and God were both seem to be punished, that since they're born from this messed up situation, they can't take part. There's a blemish in their soul. They can't take part of Israel. But then we asked the question, how come Yonas and Ben Azil said that when Leah was born, it says, Ba God, Mazel Tov, she's actually thanking God for the birth, for God, who's going to take on the other side of the Jordan. You see, the other side of the Jordan is not part of Eretz Yisrael proper. It's not part of the land of Eretz Yisrael proper. It's a much less level of holiness. Until when? Until Mashiach comes. When Mashiach will come, the Jewish people are going to be given the land of the 10 nations. This land on the other side of the Jordan is part of the land of the 10 nations. When God promised Abraham, I'm going to give you the land of Israel, Hashem promises him 10 nations, not 7. 3 of them, the 3 which are not part of Eretz Yisrael now, are actually mentioned to Avram Avinu first, which means in levels of holiness, not only are they holy, they're holy Sheba holy. They're considered even first, especially according to Kabbalah, they correspond to Chachma Bina Das, the first intellectual. They're very, very high. So externally, it looks like Reuven and God were outside of Israel because they didn't merit to go into Israel. But really, these lands is the reason they wanted to be in that land, and the deeper reason is because they're very deeply connected to Mashiach. And why are Reuven and God so connected to Mashiach? Because their whole beginning started with an act of sacrifice, a godly act for Mashiach. God is putting Leah in there at night instead of Rachel tricking and creating all this because of Mashiach. Reuven is born, so he's a Mashiach. Reuven is a Mashiach entity. And therefore, Medrash also says that as a reward for, remember we said that one of the questions we had, the Medrash says that as the reward of Reuven going out and finding the daim in the field, his grandchildren also came into the land. They said, they give me this land. Again, because Reuven is so Mashiach focused, he sees David, he sees the daim, he sees the end. He sees the end. Reuven sees the end. So that's the reason why Reuven says, give me this land. And he's willing to endure, here's the thing, he's willing to endure the shame of accusation that he's not in Eretz Yisrael because he's not so okay, his lineage is not so okay, he's a second class citizen, he's inferior. He's willing to endure that because he knows in the end, when the secret will be revealed, why he's blemished, and then he's not really blemished, because what is it really all about? So that's the much higher land. That's Mashiach land. Reuven and God, and that's why it's Mazel Tov. And who senses this? Leah senses this, because Leah is the mother of Mashiach. So she sees things as they are after Mashiach, in their ultimate. Reuven sees it, Leah sees it. So he says, now it's hidden. He says, now so much so that he's made fun of, or looked down at. But in the end, the truth will come out, what the secret of that land is in Mashiach's world. So now we go back to the beginning of the Parsha. Vayeitzei Yaakov, and the Rashi compares it to Yaakov leaving, and when Yaakov leaves, Naomi is leaving. Suddenly there's two people journeying. Yaakov is journeying, and Naomi is journeying. And Rashi throws in Rus in the package. And you wonder, how does Rus get there right in the beginning of Parshas Vayeitzei? And even if you want to say Vayeitzei because the tzaddik goes out, so it's only Naomi, what's Rus doing there? Now we understand. Rashi wants to give you an introduction, he says, to the entire Parsha. If you really don't want to know, if you want to understand this Parsha, Rashi's hinting, and really know what's going on, you got to remember Rus. In other words, we're talking over here about Mashiach. This is the story of Mashiach. Yaakov is going, he's going to build a family and everything, but there is what the real inner story is the Geulah. The real deep story is Mashiach. And therefore Yaakov's going, and we asked the question before, he's going to Haran, they're going from Moab to Eretz Yisrael, two different journeys, doesn't make a difference in direction. It's both a journey to Mashiach. It's both to establish, Yaakov was going to find Mashiach, and Rus was going, Naomi was going together with Rus, to lay the foundations of the household of David. And finally, now we'll also understand the other question we asked. How can you say that Be'er Sheva has emptied out and there's no glory and there's no radiance if Yitzchak and Rivka are still there? Such great tzaddikim and tzidkaniyas. I love his answer for this. Tzaddikim, tzidkaniyas, you can be the greatest tzaddik. It's all awesome. But compared to the job of preparing the Geulah directly, everything else is secondary. Everything else is pales in comparison. So when Yaakov leaves, and he's going on the mission now to establish Mashiach, to bring Mashiach, so he's taking all the glory, he's taking all the radiance, because everything that's left over for Yitzchak and Rivka, it's blah. I mean, it's great, but it's not the and that teaches us a very important thing. We can be doing a lot of good things these days. Everybody's got the Torah, mitzvahs, Allah guttas, everybody can do. Now, of course, every time you learn Torah to do mitzvah, you're bringing Mashiach. But realize that the most important zchus, the highest and deepest thing that anybody can do is play a role in the final Geula, because beyond that, nothing compares. So much so that when Yaakov left with that mission in Be'er Sheva, it was kind of a cloudy day, because the real energy and power and God's inner interest and heart and soul, so to speak, is in this project. The truth is that every single action of every single person somehow plays a role in this. But there are things that are more direct, and there are things that are more what we call extras. But ultimately, everything is part of it. We become conscious of it and aware of it. It makes all the difference. Thank you. May the main thing is that all of this, we should already see both the work of Rachel, let her be successful, and of Leah. We should see already the complete redemption. May it be now, now, and now. Please share this class, because I think it's important for people to realize all of this. Thank you.